Sounds good. Well, good morning, everyone. If you guys are as lucky as the last morning class, we'll be here till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon today, so I'm just letting you know. But probably not. I've kind of got it down. There's a couple slideshows here that is unique to this group, so I had to kind of go through it and figure it out myself for the first time. I knew the information, I just didn't know how I was going to put it out there for everybody to understand it. But we're not going to get too much into anything other than the fact that if you guys need to get up and like take a walk or whatever it is, because I know this stuff can kind of get you down, especially this early in the morning, you know, because this information, like he said, you've been doing this for probably a number of years. It's kind of something you've seen before. It's nothing new, so it's kind of not as exciting to look at it or learn again. But on that note, if you have to go use the restroom, also go do it. The big thing is I don't ever really tell the background, but I did safety in the Air Force for about 7.5 years, and then I've been doing safety for the Hilgeman Group for, well, we're coming up closer to about 3/4 of a year. So I just got out recently, but I have seen quite a few things, so if you do have questions, let me know. It could be something I don't understand very well, and I'll get an answer for Chuck over here, and then we'll get an answer to you guys. So without any more of that, we're going to keep going here, and we're going to press through it today and see how fast we can get through it with you guys understanding it all well. So we got severe weather, fire, workplace violence, and then this business recovery plan we don't get into at all. There's no reason for it. All right, so fires, explosions kill more than about 200 people and injure more than 5,000 workers each year. I always tell people it doesn't really look like a big number, but as with any other program that OSHA puts emphasis on, it isn't about really how many people are getting injured as much as how many people are getting killed in that specific area. So in fires, really, when it happens, like you see, you only have 5,000 workers that get injured, and then 200 die. So what it is that they're looking at the deaths compared to the injury there and saying, okay, people are dying more than we want to with fires, so we're going to put a program on it. If it was just like minor injuries occurring, we wouldn't be doing this today. Does that make sense? It'll be like that for any program we deal with too. So like it says, long and tragic history. That's just saying that everywhere back, and one of the stories to go into is not very long because it's easy. There was a bomb manufacturing plant up in the Northeast during World War II. It kind of starts all here. It doesn't necessarily start there, but it's one of the big events where this factory caught on fire. The bomb started going off, and it was killing all the employees within the plant, and it was killing people around the plant. So that's where we start, and then of course everybody knows, you know, it's not always got to be in a workplace that it occurs, but you know, Chicago's had big fires. Like I think it was LA had a big fire. There's big fires that happen throughout time that just seem to have happened in history to cause multiple deaths, and so we're trying to just get away from that and give everybody an idea. How can you protect yourself from it and not be a part of that, the victim part of it? So it requires the employers to provide this type of training and firefighting equipment. This would only really be for employees that are trained to do so. The only equipment that you're probably going to have on hand that you guys recognize is going to be a fire extinguisher. So escape plans or escape routes is a good thing to know where you're going to go in the case of a fire. It was something I had to learn the first day. Chuck kind of elaborated on where to go. So it kind of taught me how you're going to do it. And I think you said, is this south or north? I don't even know where I'm at right now. But
just so everybody's aware, I think everybody here is aware, but once you exit the building in case of a fire, obviously get out as fast as you can, the closest exit, and then we meet in the south parking lot, and there we convene there and make sure we account for all of our employees.
Yeah, so south parking lot is where you go. I just know that I can or should be able to go out this exit door here and go downstairs, go out a door, and then eventually get to that parking lot. So having an idea where you can go is always good, because if you don't know where to go, then you'll be confused and you might go that way, even though it doesn't say exit over it, but it may be something that you feel is good, but the fire might be over there. Now it's like, where do I go at this point? So knowing the ways out of the building is really important, and there are safety boards, I believe, or boards around that have maps like this on it. So if you familiarize yourself with those maps, because it may be more than fire that's on that board, it may actually tell you some other types of escape plans too. So the three main parts of it is going to be the way I exit. So it's how you're going to get out of the building. It's this red line, really, inside of the building. That's how I'm going to get to the exit. The exit itself is, of course, usually a door, has exit written over top of it. And then the way of exit discharge is once you leave the building right here, where you're going to go, and that's the meeting place. So whenever, that's the three main things you got to know in the event of a fire. Another good thing to know right here is that you can have a primary exit. That's where you think you're going to be able to go in the event of a fire. But what if the fire is in the path of the escape route? Now you need to know where else you can go to get out of the facility a different way. And that's why sometimes, and not all places do this, but the alternate will be marked just a little bit differently on the map that says, if you can't go this way, you go that way. So it says fire alarms are required if a fire could start without providing adequate warning to occupants. So you guys have a fire alarm system in the facility, so we won't go too much in that because it's already here. It will go off if there's a fire. Everybody will be notified that way. There must be enough exits of proper arrangement for quick escape. So that's just saying that can't be my only way out of this room. Being the size of this room, it can't be. That is a way out. It's not necessarily to an exit, but it will lead me to another spot that is an exit. If that was the only door out and the fire happened there, we'd be breaking out the windows in the back probably and trying to jump. So that wouldn't be a good idea, so there's always got to be enough exits so everybody has a way out of the room. So hallways have to be at least, escape routes is what it says here, but generally this is going to be talking about like your hallways. They have to be at least 28 inches wide. The more people you have in the facility, so if you have like 100, it has to be 28 inches wide. If you have 200 though, it has to be 56 inches wide. So it just gets bigger and bigger, the hallways do, as you have more employees in a facility. I have been to manufacturing plants I have, and this is a small one in some cases, there's like 1,250 employees. So their hallways were pretty huge. And it was double doors out everywhere. It wasn't just a single entrance, it had double doors. So a lot of people could go out of the building at one time. So just know everything has to be aligned. And the other big thing, and it'll talk about this, but we'll just go into, is that when you do have your exit route, don't place anything in front of it. If you do see something in front of an exit route, take it upon yourself, unless it's hazardous, to move it out of that exit route, because like I said in previous classes I've taught, is it's not always on the management team or the safety professionals that are working here or the facility managers or whoever it might be out there that takes care of this building day to day. It isn't always their responsibility to do all of those things for you. It is the employee's responsibility to ensure also that they are doing the things that they need to do to keep the place safe. So if you see something like a trash can, for instance, or whatever it may be, try to move it out of the way. If you've got a slippery floor, it's slick, someone dumped something on the floor, and they didn't pick it up, maybe if you can, clean it up. If not, notify somebody that has the ability to clean it up. Like I said, if it's hazardous, don't do it. Let somebody else go about that is equipped to do that type of job. And that's all it's talking about here is access to escape. Don't block it. Don't mask it, it says in here too. So some people like to put up things on the door, potentially, that'll mislead you, like to say that might not be an exit. And then if you don't have the sign on it, that's when it really gets misleading, if you don't have a sign above the door like that one does. And generally, that's where your problems start right there. It's like, okay, this is an exit route, but it doesn't say exit anywhere out that route. So I don't really know, being a person that's fairly new here, but only been here a day now, I wouldn't know that that's going to lead me anywhere. And if that didn't have a sign above it, I wouldn't know that's going to lead me somewhere too. So it has to be clearly marked, and it has to allow me access to it. And these are just some pictures of, people putting things in place. The door here is not marked with an exit. It has slippery type chemicals probably on the floor. Someone said it's an exit. I had never seen this, but I guess there's an X built into the door. And the first class yesterday pointed out and said it does say it's an exit. It's got the X on it. And I was like, yeah, you're right, kind of there. Pretty smart to think about, I guess. Don't lock the exits. So if you have an exit, don't lock it. Don't do anything to it. It just needs to be the way it is. And it needs to push outward, and it doesn't need to pull inward. Another picture here. a lot of these are just pictures of just what you should not to do. You can't get to the exit door back there, and they turned these lights off yesterday. If I could do that again, it'd be easier for me to actually show you on it. Again, blocked. Yeah, I can see it a little better there. If it don't put anybody to sleep, it helps me look back at least sometimes and see what I'm doing, so I can point at the pictures. So this is blocking it. Honestly, in this scenario right here, other than a tripping hazard coming out the door, I don't 100% know what the actual problem would be other than the tripping hazard. My guess, though, is there's a more severe hazard to it. The door being open potentially here could allow, if a fire in the building was to start, the oxygen flow through that, the airflow, I'd almost call the wind current that is carried through the facility may help spread that fire faster. This would be a lot better. It does have an exit marking and the path is there, but that's still protruding out a little bit. There's some material there. That would still be something they don't want to see. Again, if exit needs to be marked with exit, if it's not an exit, it has to say not an exit. And that's generally not going to be something you see inside, like a room like this. It's going to be like a door that leads to outside. I've been to places where the door on the outside leads me to a fenced-in area, an area that I can't get out of, and so it didn't say not an exit in that situation. So I was doing an audit, just like a pre-audit. So if OSHA inspection happened, they wouldn't get wrote up on anything, or hopefully not. And it didn't say not an exit. I walked out and it's a fenced-in area. I was like, whoa, it's fenced in. Yeah, we just added that. I was like, well, you got to do this too because, like I said, I'm new in all these facilities I go into. If I don't know how to get out of the building, or if I get caught in it, then, well, I guess I'm in trouble. But it would just be bad because most of the time I should be able to rely on what is in place to get me out. If the lights go out, the lights have to re-illuminate. So if you ever have a power outage and you notice one of the lights on the exit signs does not illuminate, bring that to a facility manager. Because at nighttime, or when it goes out and it's dark, if those main lights there, the like floodlights, don't come on and the exit light doesn't come on, you're in a pitch dark room and you're not going to get out of it. So when you do have an opportunity in a non-hazardous situation like a fire and see something like that, bring it up so they can fix it. So in the case of something really serious happen, it works for you. That just says what we just said. Moving on to fire extinguishers, fairly quick here. Fire extinguishers, other than, and a lot of these slideshows, and I say this to everybody, are somewhat designed, and the regulation is not wholly, it's just a lot of it's designed as a training tool or a guide for employers to take care of their workers. So you're going to see things that we talk about throughout all these slideshows that you're going to be like, well, that doesn't really apply to me like that because we don't do that as part of our job. Like it says, maintain fully charged and operational condition. It would be good that if you walk by a fire extinguisher within your work area to see if it's fully charged, if it's in the green. That would be something that you would want to do because you don't want to have a fire and then all of a sudden go get this fire extinguisher and find out it's not charged. Be like, oh man, this isn't going to work and I need it. It requires a monthly visual inspection. And this will be something that maybe a facility manager, or maybe there's somebody just in charge for fire extinguishers in the facility, and they're going to be the person that takes care of the monthly inspection. And then you got a record of an annual maintenance date and retain that record for 1 year. Like I said, that's going to fall on who's responsible for that, but it's just information that's out there that you guys should know about that they have to be doing on these fire extinguishers so that you can use them in the event that you need to use them. Kind of a picture here of don't block the fire extinguisher. We never want to block them. There's a lot of pictures here. We don't want to hang them above any type of anything really. You don't want to hang them because I always tell people, I mean, it's reality. I'm a little bit shorter than some people in this world. Well, probably 3/4 it feels like. But I'm probably not going to be able to get up here and get that off that whatever it's hanging from over top of that drum because that drum probably sits that high. In reality, it probably sits that high. So it's going to be a lot more difficult. So just don't place them like, again, it's behind something and it's sitting on a wall. So if you see these type of things in your workplace and they're not easily accessible to you, easily can be really weird kind of worded too, because if it's way up here on the wall, it's still mounted on the wall, but it's hard for me to get to. If it's down here, it causes me to bend over and pick it up. In a weird situation, you can get a back injury off that, and then you're stuck anyway in the facility. But so they want it to be like right here. I can just pull it off the wall and do it. So anywhere else other than on a fixed structure that's clearly marked and has access to it, you won't want to see a fire extinguisher any other way. If it's out of service and it's an area that they're storing them, or that a person puts them so that they can get them maintenance performed on them, that's all right as long as it's kept like that. But it can't be laying around all over the place. So if they're in your way and you say, oh, I got to move this, move it temporarily because of whatever operation's going on, you got to put it right back. If that makes sense. So it's just what kind of tag would be on it. Sometimes they're orange tags. They can be anything really, as long as they have a month that you inspected it and initials. The basics of using one: pull the pin, aim at the base, squeeze the trigger, and then spray along the base of the fire. A lot of people like to just shoot, pull and shoot, and that doesn't work. You actually have to put out the fuel source, which is it's going to be at the base. It could be down here, it could be a wall that's on fire, whatever it may be. You got to spray at the base of it, not out here where the flames are shooting out. Any questions on any of that? Moving on through. Severe weather, you guys do have areas in this facility that are designed to, I guess, provide better protection. I can't say it will always be the best because there are very severe circumstances that occur. If it was like a category, I don't know how they do it actually. I'm so used to Florida, I know it's hurricane. Well, how they classify tornadoes? I forget. F1, that's what it is, the F. I'm always used to a hurricane, so it's category. But like I've told other people, being in the Air Force, they had, I don't know if anybody knows about Homestead Air Force Base, but I think it was Hurricane, I want to say Andrew, that came up through Florida, and it totally wiped that base off the map. It does not exist today. There are some structures on it, and they do use it for some things, but it's no longer an actual operational base like it used to be. It knocked all the buildings off the ground. So in some situations, it's just going to be that severe. That means you got to leave. But I think they said the bathrooms, the main office area down there, I believe. He says that anywhere in the building that has a room that don't have windows on the outside of it is going to be a good place for you to go in this facility. So just know that you do have like a storm shelter designated areas. For that part though, the company has to have a plan. Like I said, employer's responsibility right there, but they have provided areas for you. Just like escape routes for fire, if you don't know where those locations are, ask the questions. You can get tornadoes through here. It gets a little more severe the more you go west, but it still happens, and if it does happen, you do need to know where to go, and that's the purpose of that. It might be on the boards. He's not in here right now, so I can't ask him specifically if they have those plans on the board. My guess is they most likely do, because it sounds like they've thought a lot of these things through already. Again, the plan. Any questions on that? Hey, Chuck, severe weather, I can't remember what we talked about yesterday. Do you guys have a plan on the board too?
So what as far as our severe weather goes, we've actually had to perform this before. It's not the right word, but if you hear the sirens going off, then that doesn't necessarily mean we go to a tornado shelter, which is bathrooms, interior offices that don't have no windows. Or if there's a tornado in the surrounding county, they'll also the sirens will go off here. So we'll monitor the weather up at the front office, and if it is indeed our area, then an announcement will be made. So
Okay.
Please move to a tornado shelter.
Gotcha. So there's the answers right there. So if you ever got questions, I'm pretty sure go to this guy, and he's going to be able to get them all for you for this specific facility. And then lastly, for this slide, it says it's going to be workplace violence. In the years past, I say it. I don't think when my mom and dad were growing up, and probably a lot of our mom and dads were growing up, this was as big of a deal as it is today. It seems like it's kind of an escalating matter and this is why OSHA actually puts emphasis on this program, is because this wasn't like this a while back, believe me, because early on in my career, this wasn't even really a thing that they talked about. So this is somewhat newer when it comes to the way that OSHA's looking, and actually adding severe weather is a little bit newer too. So those things don't seem like they fit into safety, but it really does, because we can do things like take steps as planning and get people trained in certain ways that they understand how to react in situations that just present you, I guess, great harm. So workplace violence, real quick. Murder is leading cause of death in the workplace for females, second for males. I always say males are just more aggressive. They actually just act more on impulse. So, they get a little angry, they get a little more angry, and then they do something, which is silly. And like I said, females are more, they think it out before they do it. So they may do something bad too. It doesn't say they don't, but they think it through, and then they make a decision. So it works like that when we get to driving too. There's a thing called cognitive function. It's the way the brain works, and males and females are much different when it comes to that. So one of every 6 violent crimes occurs at work. Big statistic there. That's a pretty big number, saying that out of all violent crimes that occur within the U.S., 1 of 6 happens in a workplace. That's an older average right here, but it says 700 homicides per year occurred at work. That's between 92 and 2012. My only guess is that this number, it's possibly rising. I'd have to look at statistics. It's kind of difficult when it comes to statistics because it takes some years to accumulate data and then say, okay, the average is going to be over that. So there may not be a new average out there at this point. It may be like we're going to wait till 2020 to actually get a new average. But 700 is a pretty big deal. Assaults at work cost, and this is just a cost matter. I don't like getting into the cost as much because it's not about the cost as much as preventing it from happening and saving lives or keeping workers from being injured. So cost does happen though. Just realize that from some aspects that's a big deal. For mine it's a little less because I'm here to try to help get you out of situations like that. Nope. So, just some of the different ways that it can occur. It can occur inside or outside the work. I don't know the outside one as well. I just give out silly little thoughts that, one of them could be this, so I could see this happening. The boss and an employee gets into it. Maybe the boss doesn't give the employee a raise or whatever it is. They just don't get along right now. So that employee waits after work for the boss to go somewhere. Maybe they know where they're going or whatever. And at that point, maybe not a severe violent crime happens, but assault of some sort could occur. Ranges from threats of verbal abuse to physical assaults and homicide. So, like it says with workplace violence, it's not just someone beating somebody up or killing somebody. It could be yelling at them, cursing at them, whatever it may be. So, I know it says telecom, so don't pay attention there because this slide set specifically we used for one and I didn't take it out for it. The next time I do this, I'll make sure that it's all set up in the way that works for you guys too. But that word doesn't mean anything because this applies everywhere, across the board. It just happened to be that we were teaching those people there. But it does. You can see here that if you were to have, I don't think do you guys take cash payments at the front office? Oh, well, that would work for you then. So say something happens and somebody's disgruntled about a part that you sold them, and they come back in, or they get mad because you raised the price on a part, and they're like, "Wow, that's crazy." So whatever could happen, they could come in and actually come in and do. They could be verbal. Most time, it's probably going to be verbal, but if they're pushed over the edge in some situations, it could get worse. Intoxicated or enraged customer kind of works in the same. Intoxicated is a little different because at that level they have less control of what they're going to do. Disgruntled employees or ex-employees, like I said right there. Now the weird one is this ex-employee thing, but I could see it happening where somebody gets fired and they come back in, and who at the front office can stop? Let's just say this dude's 250 pounds and all beef. You know what I'm saying? At the front office, is there anybody equipped to stop this person from just saying, "I'm walking through"? I'm going to go get this guy. You know, I'm going after him right now. So that's what we talk about when we look at these planning aspects. You got to think about all those weird scenarios that could occur. Like I said, some of this it's going to be more, like I said, employers are required. Anything that OSHA comes in under workplace violence, because the standard's not going to tell you exactly every scenario or whatever, it's really kind of vague in how it has to be done. It just says the employer has to provide a safe and healthy workplace. And they will enforce any kind of violations if they don't think that is being provided under the general duty clause. Click, click, click. So everything is required to have a workplace violence prevention plan. So we won't go into the plans as much because I think this works for, there's got to be a team that's involved. And I do encourage, like I've said, the employer, the management side, to at least pick a couple people off the floor and pick their brains on what they think and what they would suggest, because I think that the worker has a valuable knowledge of the working place and that they are going to be able to provide insight to things that maybe sometimes management doesn't think about because they're not actively involved in the actual work on the floor as much as you are. You're doing it day to day. Every day you come in and you're doing a specific thing in an area. And they do see all those areas, but they're not there all day. They don't see the 100% what you do and how everything is affected all day. So it's good to have a worker or two involved. But like I said, management is going to be the one that is responsible for making sure that this plan is in place. I know it says telecom, don't even pay attention to it because you can just check the black numbers out. That's what you're going to be worried about. Violence coworkers, 63%. So you can just see right there that it's kind of confrontations between workers themselves. Violence by personal relations, that's going to be, well, that's most likely going to be someone's spouse or something of that nature. So could it happen? Yeah, I guess, you know, somebody gets in a fight at home or someone leaves somebody and the other one comes in all mad, you know, I mean, so that could be a workplace violence type situation. Of course, violence by customers and then violence by strangers, and I don't know if you have any of that going on, but I have been places where just some guy, maybe homeless, I don't know, walks in, you know, and they want something. And everybody's like, well, we can't give that to you because we don't have this or something. And then that person could get mad at that point. Who knows? They could be on drugs or whatever. It doesn't have to be a homeless person. I'm just saying that, you know, in a lot of situations you're dealing with probably people that are not in the right mind at that point. If you're by a mental hospital, it might happen. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think you got a mental hospital here. Like I said, there's a plan that has to be taken. These are the steps that have to be taken by the employer to make this done. We're not going to go through all these steps to just let you see what it is. Like I said, they got to create a team here, and then they got to develop a plan, assess the threats, develop a program so that they can implement that plan and actually carry it out. And then practice emergency actions and evaluate that practice. And then approve the plan based on evaluations. We call that risk management in the military, and it's not quite as involved as 7 steps, but it's just saying that we know there's a risk. We're going to find out how we can fix this risk, how we can mitigate the risk. We're going to practice mitigating that risk, and then we're going to redo that if it didn't work. You know, if it didn't work at all, then we're not going to do it. Front office, if you have a panic button, I think you said there were a few installed. So that's a good thing. If something happens, if you do have those strangers come in, or if you do have an angry spouse or an ex-coworker or whoever it may be that walks in that front office and you don't feel comfortable with the situation because it is getting out of hand very rapidly, you have that option to hit that button. I'm not saying somebody comes in that you don't like seeing, no, I hit the button. Hit it. Just hit it. Don't do that. But in a situation where it does feel like there is an aggressor in the room, then definitely feel free to do that because that's what they're there for. Any questions on any of that? This is a simple refresher of a hazard communication program. More so the globally harmonization system. So Everybody probably knows chemicals. They probably understand what a chemical is. Most likely everybody knows that some of them are bad for you, so they're hazardous chemicals. And that's where we're going to stay with this. I know in office areas this is kind of going to be an awareness thing. For the people who work out there, it's going to be more of something you need to look at over time as things go on, you use chemicals. But we're not going to go into 100% HazCom training here. This isn't going to be like a OSHA HazWhopper where we're going to be here 2 days talking about chemicals and how it all goes down. So it's going to be fairly quick how we go through it. I'm going to skip quite a few slides because they repeat themselves. June 1st, 2016, this program is fully in effect across all boards, manufacturers, suppliers, like retailers, and the actual workers and how you use those chemicals. All of that is all complete. So this is a little bit old. It has already happened, but it's good to know that it has happened because a lot of things, when we go out and do OSHA audits for people, we're still seeing that their programs aren't fully compliant with it. So it's good to have it refreshed. Eventually, we'll have a new slide set here that goes into what it is now. But until all that compliance occurs throughout all workplaces, I doubt you'll see a change in this, the way we're going to teach it like this. So the major changes here is the written program had to change because you changed labeling requirements and you changed the SDS, safety data sheets there, which changed from the MSDS, if everybody knows. If you dealt with chemicals, you might know. So there was a big change there. So you have to change a program when there's a change that occurs within the entire program, right? So the labeling, primary, secondary, safety data sheets, and employee training, that all changed. That's not too much, though. We'll see how quickly that goes right here. So basics on the global harmonization system is the UN, United Nations, came together and almost like a big safety council and said, we're getting materials, let's for say Indonesia, China, Vietnam, wherever it come in the world, South America, could be even Canada. I don't know how their labeling system was. We usually were on board with each other a lot, but all these different places were shipping in chemicals and they all had different labels and they didn't tell you the things you need to know. They may not have been English, so you had to have a translator in some situations to come in and actually figure out what was going on. They may have had, let's say it was a super dangerous chemical, but we used skull and crossbone and they didn't. They used something like a dead rat or something laying on the ground, and so it was all weird. Nothing made sense, right? So the UN came together and said, across the world, if you're basically importing to us, it will have the same label as the one we use. Not saying that we as the United States said we. The United Nations, basically them as being we, we're going to make it all the same. Like I said, June 1st, 2016, it says it again. We're going to skip through all this because it already has to be in compliance at this point. OSHA inspectors are required by law, so when they come in this facility, they are required by law to look at your program, which includes everything about it. The easiest thing, and we'll see the labeling differences from the old label to the new label, the easiest thing for them to spot in your work center is go into an area where you store hazardous chemicals and look at the labels, and if they see one being wrong or two being wrong or all of them being wrong, they'll start digging through the rest of the program. And they'll start finding out. They may do employee interviews. They may talk to people that use those chemicals, ask them questions about the program. As soon as they start figuring out that those questions aren't being answered right, they dig even deeper. And then it gets to the management level, and then it all unravels all the way through. And we'll see at the end, and I won't cover them all, but it shows some OSHA fines that have changed in value, but it's what they hit people on. Go past that. So this is the new label. I did see that label on chemicals out there in the plant as I was walking through it. So if this label is not on it and it doesn't look pretty much like that, then it's probably wrong. So for an office worker, if you are out and about, if you have to go out there, or just for some reason somebody brings a chemical in the office, which probably shouldn't happen, but if it did happen, for your awareness, if you see something and it has this label, then it's a hazardous chemical. And you do not need to handle that. The people that have been trained on that program to the level of handling it should. Even if it's just a can that you can pick up and move, get somebody else to do it because who knows? The worst case scenario would be you pick it up and you drop it and the top falls off and now you have a hazardous chemical spill. somewhere in your area, and you may not know how to deal with that because HAZCOM training is all dependent on the level of the user usually. And most people in the office probably haven't been trained how to handle it, the proper precautions to take whenever there's a spill, and the PPE probably required to clean up or actually use that chemical. So, has to be in compliant, has to be from, that says as December 2015, that's distributors or manufacturers are required to make sure those chemicals are fully labeled. So, as they come through this facility, if you were to get one that is not labeled, get a hold of Chuck or who else was it? Scott? Yeah, get a hold of Scott and he'll get you a label for that. He'll have all that information and then you guys can put that on there and it'll be in compliance. If for some reason he can't get it though, I'm sure he's the man to call the manufacturer and actually get that label. So 6 main elements to the new one, and you'll see that the old one has none of this. The new one's going to have the actual name of the chemical on it. The old one did not. It has a signal word, danger or warning, danger being more severe. The old one did not have that. It did not have any of these, by the way. Hazard statement, something saying what it is. Flammable aerosol is what they say here. It could be anything, though. It could say cryogenic something, or whatever. If you get it on your skin, you just freeze. So, so there are things out there. It's going to tell you exactly what it is up front. Precautionary statement, keep cool or keep warm, or keep out of sunlight, keep away from fire. It's going to tell you things like that on the sticker. It's basically like a small SDS, safety data sheet, printed on the front of the container labeling so that you can easily identify what it is, what the hazards are, special precautions needed to be taken in that event. So if there was a spill, then you would know. And then, of course, you got these things here, which we'll look at in a minute. That's the new sticker again. Up close, this is what you're going to look like. It says it has all those things on it. Tells me what it is. Tells me danger. It tells me more information about it. It tells me the precautions to take when handling or storing it. And the manufacturer's information, and of course the symbols up here. And there is a list of symbols in the SDS book.
A chart down there.
Yep. So down where they're keeping the SDSs, there is a chart that has all of these in it. If you were to go to OSHA regulation, that actually shows this. I think it's Appendix D or something like that of the HAZCOM standard. It's quite lengthy. There are a lot of symbols out there. So if you're handling chemicals and you don't know what that is, you probably need to familiarize yourself with the ones that you do handle and at least know where to find that symbol, that list of symbols. Because in the case that OSHA came in and said, hey, what is this right here? Maybe you don't use it. Maybe you're just storing it on a shelf out there for customers to buy. And they say, okay, what's this symbol mean? I don't know. I have no idea. But if you can tell them where you can find the answer, that is one step up. Because then you can go there and say, oh, it says it's this. All right. But really, if you got it out there, you should be aware of the hazards of that chemical. And this program doesn't only deal with chemicals, but for your workplace, it really does. You guys don't deal with combustible dust and things of that nature. Secondary containers, the only thing about it is that if you have a secondary container that comes from the primary, in this picture you can see it's primary container and then you got secondary. If the secondary is going to be stored and not used immediately, then it has to be labeled. If it's going to be used immediately, I mean you pour it into a little container and you're going to use that on whatever it is that you're using, then at that point you're going to be able to, you don't have to label it at that point. But if you're going to store it, you got to. June 1st, 2016, you'll see that 100 times. So, but we're not concerned about that now because it's past. We're just concerned about making it right at this point if it's not. So this is the O label. You can see it has nothing on it. It says if it's health, flammable, or reactivity hazard. It also says, you put a little mark on it, and it says you got to wear protective equipment. I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that protective equipment is. So the new labels do go into detail about some of that information. And then it also, you can go to SDS, and it'll give you the rest of the information. So you cannot have these stickers anymore. That's the difference. You can see a big difference there. So I passed through all this. If you got point of consumption, so if you got pills or if you got cosmetics or whatever it may be that you actually use, it doesn't have to have a label. If you were to take and, let's say, I know it talks about pharmaceuticals a lot, where if you are in a pharmacy and you are using these things, like taking them out and you're dispensing and all that, it doesn't have to be labeled. But if you're getting it in a shipment of whatever it is, and it's in large quantity, that would have to have labels on it. This probably is not going to apply to you very much right here. But it's a difference, and I just put it out there that there are some special things out there that say you don't have to label it. The HAZCOM standard, 1910, 1200, will have all the answers that you look for if you have any specific questions about it. It's a little bit lengthy. There's a lot of different subsections to it, so but you can find what you need. We're not going into that. Safety data sheets, like I said, it changed. They only added, it's like 16 sections. The old one was a little less than that. And there's not really a big difference in the SDS. It's just the way they worded it and how they put it together. They kind of wanted it to meet the same kind of format as the label was. So they changed the SDS to kind of match that up. Of course, the SDS goes into more detail about things. So if you were to have a chemical spill or someone does get it in their eye or whatever it may be, then you would consult the SDS first, and it may tell you need to contact somebody. Like, hey, you need to have a hazmat team come in because no one's probably going to be qualified. They don't have respirators, get out of the room, whatever it is, because you're not supposed to have that chemical in that quantity exposed out in the atmosphere. Who knows? That's an extreme situation, you know. A lot of these manufacturing plants I go into, they do have a large quantity of chemicals in like 5-gallon drums that if they were dumped, it would be a really bad situation and everybody in the building needs to go at that point. But the awareness part for the office, like I said, just know there's stickers on it. If you see the sticker, it's hazardous chemical. Don't touch it, don't play with it, don't use it. One of the big things is, this will be for the workers out there for the most part, is that if for some reason you can't get an SDS or you get a chemical in and it doesn't have an SDS or you don't know where to find it, I'm only guessing that Scott might be the person to go to again to get that SDS. But a lot of times you can go on Google and find it as well. So there's a couple options, but if for some reason you guys can't have it, I'm sure the management will try to contact the manufacturer. If that doesn't work though, you're going to send an email most likely to that manufacturer, and they're going to, if they don't get a response or they get a poor response that says we're not going to do it, then they're going to put that in a file, and OSHA is going to be okay with that. So know that sometimes, I'm guessing, this can happen. So everybody's required to have training. Anybody that is within an area that has hazardous chemicals. The training, like I said, dependent on who uses it, who does it, how in-depth it'll get when we look at it from those aspects. But all new employees have to get it, new hires, rehires. It says job transfers and even temporary hires have to be trained on it. Also, best practice is annual training. The only thing I know about it is that upon initial assignment to duties, you're required to be training. But a lot of people like to do it annually just to refresh people on it. There are changes that occur all the time. So when a change does occur, you get a new chemical in the building. Everybody needs to be retrained, saying, hey, we got this chemical, be aware. Here's the hazards of the chemical. Here's how it's got to be stored, and here's where the SDS is found for it. This is a part that we won't jump into too hard, but you can just see from this, these numbers increase like 15%. OSHA just inflated all their fines. But you can see just for a written program, they have a ton of areas that they can cite people on. And a lot of this comes from an employee interview. It starts off that way where they come in the facility, they might see something that's a little bit off. Maybe one of the things we talk about is a container, and this is good for office people too. No container with anything in it. I mean, if it's your water jug on your desk, it might be a little different, even though that's still a little bit, that could be something that they nitpick on. But if it's a container that you don't know what's in it, don't play with it. Have somebody come in and dispose of it at that level. Because a lot of times you run into places, and I brought up Windex the other day, is that Windex is pretty simple. People like to transfer Windex to other bottles, like bigger spray bottles or whatever it may be that works better. Maybe the old one doesn't work, but it's a full bottle, so they transfer it to a new bottle so they can use it again, but you can't tell what's in it. So someone's like, I think it's Windex, so they open it up and they smell it, because a lot of people probably know what Windex smells like. But what if it's not Windex? It could be a point that you just drop to the ground. I mean, and it may not kill you, but it's going to take your breath away, and you're going to drop to the ground. So chemicals unlabeled is a big thing that OSHA hits on. They can see it immediately. They can say, that is a container. I don't know what's in it. We're going to start digging at this point because that's a little scary to them. So you can say that if it doesn't have a label on it, look at all the different ways they can hit you on that too. But employee interviews, it's going to have it all on the bottom. It really starts at that. Once they see something wrong, they're going to pick somebody, and they're going to say, okay, I need you to come and do an interview, and you have right to representation, but often it's not going to be your employer. If you're a union rep, you have a right for a union representative. You can have legal counsel, but your employer could make the interview uncomfortable for the employee, and it may not let them answer the question they want, or let OSHA hear the answers they want, because that employee's going to be too afraid to answer it correctly. So that's kind of the deal, and that's why interviews on here a lot. Safety data sheets, you know, they're pretty simple, so there's not a lot of things they can hit on. Again, employee interview. Just not answering the questions the way they want to hear them really for that. And then employee training. You got a few things there. But like I said, it all comes back. We're not going to hit them all, just kind of ideas. Show you what they're looking at. Anybody got any questions on HAZCOM?
Like Aaron said, the biggest thing I think is making sure your containers are, taking water out of a drum and put them in the bottle. It needs to be marked, so Scott can get you those stickers and get those marked. Also, kind of standardized on stuff back in the hydraulic shop, standard degreasers and things like that. But anything new coming in, we need a data sheet for it, an SDS sheet for it, so we can get it in the book and get it marked properly.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many things we had the Hildeman group come in and do work through all of our stuff, and we have like 230 chemicals here that have to be marked.
Yeah, that's a lot of chemicals. 230 is a lot. So that tells you they are out there, and everybody just needs to be aware they're out there, So that's the big thing. If you're not, you don't know what it is, and a lot of times it's where mistakes occur. Bloodborne pathogens, this standard is mainly based on career fields like where hospitals are, let's say physicians, nurses, paramedics, firefighters, policemen. It kind of runs in a level of where people are going to come in contact with bloodborne pathogens the most, or really just contact with blood is what we're talking about. That could have a virus or bacteria in it that can affect you. So it'd be something unhealthy going into a healthy person and making you unhealthy. Like I said, virus or bacteria that can cause disease in people. These are some different types. The two on the top probably going to be most prevalent. These are a little less that you'll find out there. There may be something in many others I'm thinking of, but probably not going to be Ebola very much, or malaria in this part of the world. So the top two is probably going to be your main concerns in the workplace. I'm not going to go into what it is, but I think we all kind of understand AIDS. It breaks down the immune system, and it basically makes it where you can't fight off any other type of infections in your body. So you become, in a sense, vulnerable to all of those things out there. And that's a problem, because the body has to be able to fight it. Hepatitis B, this is something that can cause cancer in the liver, cirrhosis liver cancer, and can survive dried blood up to 3 months. That's a pretty significant thing there, saying that a lot of people, when they cut themselves, they'll take whatever, and we're probably not talking about a paper cut here, but we'll say you get a really nice little cut. We had things in the military off a A-10 aircraft. They were so low to the ground, they had a antenna on the very bottom of it. It was called a blade antenna, and people would walk under it and slice a gash in their head. And so we did deal with bloodborne a lot on the flight line, actually. which you wouldn't think about. But so what did we do with all of those things that we put on their head to keep it from going everywhere, all over the place, rags or whatever? Those things went into a waste container for us to go get rid of later, however, by incineration. But a lot of people, if they're going to get cut that bad, or on your arm, or wherever it is, your hand, because the hands are a big place, they do that, and then until they get somewhere that they know they can put whatever on it, they just throw it in a trash can. But if you think about it, if this virus can last up to 3 months dry, then you potentially expose somebody else down the line that may handle trash in a way to that virus itself. So, if you do have something like this, it is not something that you have to disclose. That's the big thing. Most medical things you don't have to disclose, so you don't know who could potentially have this virus, or any other for that matter. This is routine exposure, but if you do come in contact with bloodborne pathogens, it'll say it later. We'll just skip that one. My best recommendation is well, number one, report it to the employer. Let them know what happened. They're going to keep that on your medical record, and then you have the choice at that point. If you want to go to the hospital and get a vaccination, I would say go do it. I've been vaccinated with it like several times, so I think everything you're vaccinated from is a good thing, because when you go into an environment where that actually exists, your body can fight it off. So once you get in contact, just do it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like you're going to get it, because it's not that way. It's like getting bit by a rattlesnake. You know, they have anti-venom. When you get the anti-venom put in you, you don't get worse, you get better. So it's not like it's killing you. It's still the same thing. It's just been remodeled to help you instead of hurt you. So this is kind of for routine people. So what it is a series 3 shot. Second shot is given 1 month after the first, and this kind of goes to it. As you can see, these slideshows are kind of pointing at hepatitis B because it's more severe. It causes liver cancer, and this doesn't happen it doesn't take as long as HIV does to take its effects. It happens rather quickly in your lifetime. So, and once it happens, you got it. There's no going backwards on it. So this series gradually builds up the body's immunity to hepatitis B virus. So there's the details of that. Of course, we've talked about that one, and it's a bloody finger. That'd be what we're saying right here. We got a rag here, it's bloody, and what are we going to do with it? You know, at this point, how are you going to handle this situation? Again, so some of the things you want to know, where to locate them at least, and they should be available. If somebody does get hurt and you have blood exposed, and like I said, a lot of things are going to be cuts, and you put a Band-Aid on, whatever. But we got a lot of blood exposure for some reason. Somebody actually hurts himself kind of bad. Latex gloves would be one thing you might want to have. Safety glasses to keep it out of your eye, because you're probably going to help them a little bit until somebody either gets here or you actually get them to a hospital in your car. Depends how you do that. So I don't know about the splash goggles face shield. That seems like a lot of blood at that point. I mean, probably not going to deal with that. But the big one is the pocket mouth-to-mouth resuscitation mask. That's a great thing to have, or potentially ask for, because if you have to do that type of resuscitation, if they got blood in their face, there's only one way to get away from it. If you don't have it, you got to do it, and you're going to get blood and maybe in your mouth. Or you just say, I'm going to let them die. You have a life decision in front of you at that point. But if you have this tool, it makes it easier on your brain once you think about all this to go, okay, this won't be so bad at this point. I don't have to worry about that blood getting into my system potentially and infecting me with something. This was a big thing for people in the combat world too. We all like to have those in our kits, because in the combat world, blood is real and it's going to be everywhere. So it's a good tool to have, though, just so you know. Anything contaminated, clothing, whatever it is, stuff you use to clean up spills or blood on the ground, not spills exactly. You're going to want to dispose of them, like I said. They talk about a container here that's used for like a biohazard container. A lot of places don't have those orange biohazard containers. So what are you going to do with everything? You're just going to throw it in the trash? I wouldn't. I'd put it in a bag, make sure you understand what's in that bag. And then what I would say is contact the hospital and see if they have a disposal area. A lot of times they do, and they incinerate their stuff too. Or they'll send it somewhere to be incinerated. So that's a good way to get rid of this type of stuff. But make sure that it's all disposed of in the proper way. And then decon, it says here the standard recommendation for it is at least a quarter cup of bleach per gallon of water. So you do that, and then you can pour that over the area that you're trying to clean up. And then from there, it kind of goes into it over here too. But this is another way of doing it. I never can say that word though, tuberculocidal. I like to carry out the U somehow, or I don't know, it's an accent of mine, I guess. But I can't say it that well, but it has to say that on it. Or at least you have to be able to find out where it says it. But that'd be another way to disinfect. This says spill cleanup, so this is talking about your quarter cup of bleach and the gallon of water type thing. So how to clean it up, you're just going to do these steps here, which I guarantee that you would forget after this class. So when it comes to it, that's when it gets weird. Like I said, once these containers, you probably don't have that. So do something else. At least you control it and you don't just throw it in trash and expose the trash man down the line to hepatitis B and dried blood. Wash your skin. Obviously, you're going to wash pretty good. Eyes, 15 minutes if you get it in your eyes. You won't probably have this very often, sewage. But you could come in contact with, I don't know when you're out on job sites or how this works. I know that in some industries they go all over the place to weird areas. And they have found syringes. Do not pick up the syringe. Call somebody about that. Because a lot of people just, oh my gosh, it's right there, I'm going to move it. Bad idea, because if you get a needle prick, it's the same as getting blood in your body right there at that point. So contaminated feminine products and used bandages in trash, overflowing toilets with human waste and all that type of stuff. So this is just like housekeeping type. That was a real fun one, wasn't it? It's fun to teach too. If it was a medical career field, it would apply much greater. But everybody needs to know that blood, it can have things in it that you don't want. So when it happens. So driving safety, real quick overview of what we're looking at here is that not everybody in here drives a truck for the company. It's not like commercial driving. We're not putting it into that atmosphere. We're just saying safely driving altogether. They talk about driving safety being a part of the work life, and that's why we do this, is because every morning when you have to go to work, you drive to work. Every day, well, some people bring their lunch, but some people may go get their lunch, but every day you're going to drive home from work. So work is the big focal point of why you're driving. So that's why we're going to do this here right now. So more than 35,000 people die in crashes a year. That's a big number. That is one of the highest. This is one of the leading causes of death in the United States. And may actually be, if I looked it up, it might actually say it is the number one. That's a lot of deaths right there. If you look at the OSHA fatalities that occur over a lot of the industries, that doesn't even come up to that number. So approximately 96% or 96 deaths per day, 4 deaths per hour. That's a pretty big number. So that means that somebody out there is, well, in the hours we've did it, so there might have been 8 deaths already on the roadways in the United States, which that's pretty crazy to think about. But I mean, it's a big country, and it happens all over the place. You don't get to decide. Yesterday, a guy almost pretty much run me off the road and destroyed my rim on my car. So Chuck and Randy, right? They all got together and helped me out with that. But heck, if that car would have, if they would have actually hit me, if they would have swerved over any faster, I wouldn't have had time to react to that, and they would have hit my car. And who knows what would have happened to me at that point? Because when I did, I hit a curb on the side. The other side was a guardrail. So if I would have hit that guardrail going at the speed I was going, I could have potentially came back out into the road and got hit by other cars at that point. So I think of it that way. I'm like, you don't ever get to decide these type of things all the time. So we'll talk about defensive driving, how you can kind of figure all of that out. But it happens. You don't decide when it always happens. So safe driving requirements, on that note actually, you don't decide other people's actions and how it might happen, but you get to decide your actions, how your actions are going to play in. So if it was one of you that did that to me yesterday, I forgive you, but Fact is. So, safe driving requires comprehension, concentration, coordination, quick reflexes. The things that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides reduce those abilities on you for you to comprehend, concentrate, coordinate, and I guess it's not. I don't want to say reflect, but you know what I'm saying. I can't figure out a word for it right now. It's too early. Drinking and drugs. One of the big reasons why fatalities occur on the roadways. It says including marijuana. I didn't put that in there. That's actually coming from the NSC, National Safety Council, when they put some information I grabbed from them on this. So what you'll see here is that in Colorado they have legalized marijuana and they allow it, and they don't restrict its use as much as other states do that allow it. There are other states still allow it, but they restrict where it can be used and when it can be used. But in Colorado, it's kind of more open now. I mean, eventually, they're just I don't know if they can. They'll just be walking around the street smoking marijuana. But they have seen an increase in vehicle-type accidents and different types of violations occurring. Quite a large increase, too. It wasn't just a small one. It was a big jump. So now they're trying to put out breathalyzers for marijuana to say, okay, have you smoked? Did you smoke in your car? When did you smoke? And there are some devices out there that they've been testing that are fairly accurate. They can tell almost when you did it, just based on like something in your mouth, I guess, or I don't know how it works exactly. So, distracted driving, this is going to be like you're playing on your cell phone or whatever. You could be eating. You could have kids in the back that are yelling and you're just like, shut up. And, but you turned around, right? So you're distracted for a minute, but anything that takes your eye off the road and keeps you from actually looking at what you're doing. Maybe that's why the guy or the girl, I don't know who it was yesterday, swerved over at me. Maybe they just wanted to get in that lane too. I don't know. And just didn't see me. I was in a blind spot. I could blame them for many things, but maybe they had a real reason why they had to do that. So it talks about, here's some steps that you can take to kind of keep yourself away from distracted driving, and this really pertains, and you're going to see all these being mostly about GPS and cell phones, because GPS and cell phones have increased the fatalities within distracted driving category so greatly it's catching up to the #1 spot of what causes most fatalities and traffic accidents. We will see it surpass speeding and alcohol and all that one day. I'm very sure of that because of the drastic increase of what's happened with cell phone use. So, talks about using that equipment prior, setting it up. If you got to use GPS or whatever, I use my phone for GPS to travel all over the place. Every week I'm going somewhere else, and I have to travel like 6 hours. So what I'll do, usually I kind of know the routes, so I'll get to a certain point, I'll pull over, I'll get some gas, I'll turn on my GPS right there while I'm stopped, I'll put it in center console. I don't need it anymore. She's going to talk to me. I don't need to talk to her or push the buttons. I don't need to text people while I'm going to say, hey, guess where I'm at? Birmingham, Alabama. I'll snap a picture. I know people do it. I see it all the time. You also see people on cell phones, and I like to bring this one up because we did a count the other day, me and a coworker coming back from basically right around outside of Jacksonville, Florida. And we drove that distance. Usually we fly, but we were driving, and it was odd to see that so many people were in the left lane on the interstate going slow. And I'm coming up on them, okay, they're going to get, nope, they don't get over. Now I'm behind them, and I'm like, this is the passing lane. Why are you in this lane going 60 miles per hour or whatever? And we would pass him on the right, and he would do a count of everybody who was on a cell phone. Every single person that was in that lane was on a cell phone. They had no idea what was going on behind them, most likely.
It's the cell phone lane in Florida.
It is, yeah, I guess so, yeah. So it was pretty crazy to see, but if you go out there and you notice those things and you start paying attention, you'll see. I'm sure we all already know that people are always on their cell phones in their car. So it talks about turning it off. I'm not saying you have to do that. Just put it in standby mode or whatever and put it down. I don't know if that's what the mode's called, but make sure the screen's black and don't pick it back up. And then another thing you can do is don't answer the call on the road. When you answer a call, you're more focused on hearing than you are seeing. So you think you're seeing. This is where I talked about the cognitive function part. You can't do two things at once. It's absolutely impossible, period. No way you can do it. So many tests have been run on that, how you can do two things. You can do them very quickly, one to the next, but you can't do them both simultaneously. So I know people do that, like pat on the head, rub on that type of thing. It's not really the same scenario as what they're talking about there, because there's a way of that's not really the way that you're thinking. It's a motor skill, a function of your body. So, but cognitive thinking is one of those things where you can't do that. So when you're listening, you're not seeing. When you have other distractions happening, you're not seeing either. You're paying attention to something else at that moment. Split second, an accident can happen. That's all it takes. It doesn't take anything more than a second. Unless you're the only one on the road, maybe it'll take more than a second. But if there's more people on the road and they do something, or construction's happening, or whatever it is that's happening around you in your environment, once you take your eye off the road, those things are now going to impact potentially the way that the outcome comes into play. I know the weird thing was I was in Tucson, Arizona, and they had construction going on, and I was driving, and I had all these traffic cones, but there were people talking, so I was listening to them and kind of paying attention to what they're saying, and then not too far up the road, a guy just walks out in the middle, puts a stop sign up, and a big front loader, like vehicle, I don't know what you call them, but the big, the giant, I call them front loaders, I don't know if that might be a Kentucky word, but they move dirt, and he pulled straight out in the middle. And I had to hit my brakes pretty hard. It happened really quick, though. I wasn't even thinking about it. I didn't see the guy walking, and I guess he was like, everybody's got to stop right now. So that's what he did. So I could have hit him, or that big piece of equipment could have pretty much flattened my car, probably. So pull over to a safe location, put the vehicle in park if you have to answer a call. That's the best way to do it. I know that they have the hands-free thing, where you have the earpiece. The military actually outlawed that, too, and said, that's not helping anybody. It's still the same concept of listening instead of seeing. So they said you couldn't do that. For a while they were saying you could, but the traffic accidents, the way that we report them, they weren't seeing a change in accidents occurring from this. Aggressive driving, we all kind of know this. You can be the aggressor or the person being aggressed. So just know it happens out there. I know down here it's talking about the best offense is a solid defense. This is mainly teaching, promoting defensive driving skills. Like yesterday when the guy pulled over, I don't know if he was aggressing me. I have no idea if that's the case. But the defensive driving part was my decision to either let that car hit me or go to the side of the road and try to let them merge in front of me like that. It's all about the way that you're thinking at the time and what you do as a reaction that hopefully prevents the accident to occur. So talk about the risk or whatever, and how that works. Encourage employees. And this is kind of from the employer's standpoint. I think this training is kind of where they're pushing some of this. So through this training right here, these topics are kind of being addressed in a way that at least you're being retold it and more aware of it. If you actually take anything from it or use any of it, or whatever, you think about this training, it's up to you. It always usually works to that level, but it's being put there for you to understand. Another one is fatigue. They call it drowsy, but fatigue driving. Fatigue driving is kind of like being drunk driving, It also can be a little worse than that to some degree, but it is a lot like it. I like to tell a story. I drove from Tucson to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, without stopping any. And when I got to New Orleans, I was jamming Monsters and everything all night, energy drinks, just going at it. I'm going to make it all the way there. I'm ready to get to the beach. I'm tired of the sun and all the sand out here with no water. So I'm going, and in New Orleans, the traffic stopped and backed up, and the next thing I know, the person in the car with me wakes me up because I fell asleep. Because the environment became so slow on me that my body said, I can't do it anymore. Like there's nothing to keep me moving. So, best recommendation, this is the one that we used to always go by, is drive no more than 8 hours. If you drive more than 8 hours, now you're putting yourself at a position that you may become fatigued, because we all know that the further you drive and the scenery doesn't change, the more tired you get, and then you start going, oh my God, I'm so bored, and your brain can't, it starts saying, okay, I'm just ready to give up at this point, really. And it will. Like I said, New Orleans, it gave up on me. 1/3 of U.S. adults sleep less than 7 hours. Another little fact about it. Driving drowsy occurs when people take a wheel despite feeling sleepy or fatigued, and 5,000 people died from fatigue driving out of the 36,000. So it's a pretty big number, and that's why it's a big factor. A couple things you can do: if you can pull over, you can take a nap, you can schedule breaks. I don't like to really drink caffeinated beverage, but that is something out there. It might keep you awake until you get to a good stop point, but eventually that caffeinated drink's going to wear down, and I notice this when I drink coffee is I'll get wired out and just jacked up and go crazy. And then when I come down from it, it's like I just fall down. I'm real tired after that. Even on a day I got good sleep. It's like it uses energy that's not there, or it is there too fast, and then it makes you tired. Seatbelts, the only thing I say about a seatbelt is use them. I don't care what you think about them. They may be uncomfortable. You may not think they save lives. That is something people have said to me. And you're right. In a really bad accident, there's not a lot you can do about things. But as cars improve, and they can take hits at greater speeds and different angles, the seatbelt is designed not really to keep those functions of the car from happening, and it's kept to keep you in the car when it happens. Do you want to be ejected? I don't know. We had a guy, I did traffic accident investigations, we had a guy ejected and run over by 2 other vehicles. That's what happens when you don't wear a seatbelt. So that's just one example of what would happen. But you don't want to be ejected from a vehicle in most situations. Could you live through that? Maybe. Do you want to take the chance that you'll live through that? You still got to go through the glass in the front first. So you're going through that. Your body's going to be placed in an odd shape as it goes around the steering wheel, and you might have fractures from that. And then when you hit the road, you're going to hit it really hard because you're probably driving at a speed that's fairly significant if you're ejected. Most fatalities occur over 45 miles per hour, so know that. So that's why speed is one of the leading factors. So just keep in mind that seatbelts are very important. They actually do save lives, and they save a lot more lives than the people that don't wear them. Most of the time, that's a bad outcome. Just fines. I always tell people, though, I'm not about the cost as much as getting the word out there. Hey, probably we don't want to do this. And then the last one is a fairly quick one, because this is not a full-blown arc flash training, but it is an awareness training so everybody understands. This isn't really for your technicians level either. You guys will get a more significant arc flash training. That will be from this slide set, but this is kind of for the office workers to know, hey, if you see this kind of thing happening out on the work floor, could be in the office either, because you have electrical enclosures in the office, circuit breaker panels maybe. There's a switch over there on the wall. So if you see people working in those electrical panels and they're wearing a certain gear that will show you in these pictures what it looks like, then don't go in that area. There should be a boundary around it that they put out there that is physical. You'll see it, and that means don't go in that area. And I would say stand back from that, because a lot of what we're finding out is OSHA doesn't have an arc flash standard. It's actually coming from the National Fire Protection Association. OSHA references them in their standard as being the leading source to get the information for arc flash, so they will enforce it under NFPA standard. The big takeaway for the standard itself is that I don't know where I'm going with it. Lost it, guys. Lost it. Probably helped you out. You ever do that? You just get into something and you start talking about it, you know where you're going, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't know where I'm going anymore. Don't do that in your car. Oh, I don't know how to drive. That's bad. Be aware. So, this is kind of one of those things I talked about. You know, you always see these low numbers of fatalities and stuff. This is a Bureau of Labor Statistics. They kind of do a lot of the statistics for accidents in the workplace. You can see that this is like 10.5 a day. That's not all fatalities. It seems like a small number compared to the number of workers out there actually doing it. But the sad thing is that of those 10.5, quite a bit of those are severe injuries to fatalities potentially. Am I still in the camera? It's probably going to be a little weird. We should tell them that if they can't hear you when you talk over there, they're going to just see me standing there. Now they know. Pushing through. Like I said, this is a long slide set. We're not going to go through that. This is what an arc flash is, for the most part, or what happens in an arc flash. Instantaneous heat from ambient room temperature from basically 0 to 3,500 degrees. Well, it's saying ambient room is about 80. I don't know if I agree with that all the time. It depends on the state of the room and what you have to keep it as. But to 3,500 degrees in 1/6 of a second, it's going to be a fireball that comes out. We'll see a video of that, of a really significant arc flash. But it's like an explosion that occurs. Big fireball. All the metal within that enclosure that does melt will be forced out of that panel onto anything on the outside of it. So this is why we talk about it for the office workers. If you see them in that arc flash gear, that's their protection from all of that fireball, that shrapnel. You don't have that. You're going to look just like we do today, and it's going to not be fun if it hits you. All the clothing you have on, if it's not fire resistant, will, like that, catch on fire. It will be so instantaneous that you won't even know it even happened. And if you're wearing something like I am that's not fully cotton, it will melt to my skin instantaneously. I can show you a picture of what that looks like, but it's pretty nasty. So this is an arc flash, really big though. This is what they call a switch gear. He's charging a spring in here, so he's basically compressing a spring, and then what he's going to do is at a certain point they're going to release that spring. It's going to release so fast that the two conductors hit. But this did not happen like that. It happened too slowly. Big fireball. That guy actually, if I'm told right, he died. The other guy in the room did not, because he was outside of the initial blast zone. So what you've seen there is the fireball. We won't go into all these videos, but so with that gear, that's why you'd want to wear it. But like I said, if you're not wearing that, you're not going to want to be in an area that goes off like that. It is like a bomb. So some of the facts about it is if you did get burned, it could take up to 4 months, and that's probably a light term. It's probably going to take longer than that if you get a 3rd-degree burn. If you get a 4th-degree burn, it's usually going to lead to a fatality. If not, and it's going to be an amputation of some part of your body. So you don't want to get into these situations. I don't want to cover all of this, but just to give you an idea, there's the 3rd-degree burn. Sunburns, 1st degree. Blisters, the 2nd degree. Deep tissue damage, 3rd. And then tissue and bone destruction is 4th. So that's the different heats as it goes up and what kind of burns you would have. Quick pictures, not going through them all. This one's pretty significant here. You can see how bad this burn is. He's healing. 3 months post, you can tell that's not going to happen in 4 months. So pretty big deal. If you're not in the appropriate PPE, this is the kind of effects it has on the human body. This is somebody that had something that melted to their skin. So definitely don't want that. And that's a medical procedure right there, fasciotomy, I think. They have to cut the skin so it's like a hot dog swelling in a microwave. Eventually it'll burst. There's so much heat in the skin it's trying to get out. So different ways it can happen. We won't jump through all the ways it can happen. Just know that it can happen through these ways. So when you're a person like me or you and you're walking around, you see somebody working in a cabinet, you don't control these things right here on the left. So if it happens, it just happens so quickly that you wouldn't know it probably happened until you're burned. But these are different ways that it would happen. A lot of times it's described as an arc flash as being an air gap between two conductors, meaning as two conductors come closer together to each other, they start basically, I can't remember the electrical term for it, but as they get closer, the energy coming through the line starts to kind of, you ever seen a taser, for instance? You know what I'm saying? Like you press it, it zaps across the air. That's basically an air gap. So as two conductors at high energy now are coming closer, an air gap forms like that, but there's nothing any longer to contain it. A wire contains the electricity. If you don't have a wire, it goes where it wants. It finds itself grounds. It will go to the next source of a ground. So it basically just explodes at that point, just all kinds of energy, until the power box itself is not functional. Says surface of the sun's 11,000 degrees. Some arc flashes up to 35,000 degrees. You won't see this in this building, so don't worry about that. But that's total incineration. Doesn't matter what kind of PPE you're in. Talk about it. Don't need that. I'm going to go to PPE now so you guys get an understanding of what that looks like, because that's important to know what it is visually when it comes to PPE. Come on. I should have just pulled up the slideshow, huh? At this rate. I could show you this one. I actually might show this. I think this is the one where you can see. So they basically, this Westex company makes a arc flash. They test arc flashes, and they test the gear that people wear. You can see that shirt caught on fire pretty quick. See how big the fireball is. That kind of shows you how fast it's going to happen and how fast you're going to burn. Like, it doesn't take very often for it to happen. The other video here in the stuff shows what doesn't happen. So if you were the worker, for instance, if you see somebody wearing this type of gear and an arc flash occurs, you can see that they didn't catch on fire because that stuff they're wearing is made to not catch on fire. And the fireball wasn't great because, well, there was no clothing to burn. There was no fuel source at that point. So it takes away all that that ability for that to happen. You're going to get the blast wave off of it and some shrapnel, but that will protect you from the shrapnel too out of that. So like I said, if you're not a person, and this will show you what's really happening at the moment that you just watched, you can see all of this happening. It actually is pretty violent in nature, you know, what occurs in that split second. So if you see them in that kind of gear, don't go near them because they're protected. Man, my voice. This is the different things you want to look at, though. This is the main point for anybody, you know, for your awareness point. If you notice, this is one category of PPE that you might see out there. Well, the only one, actually, right? Yeah, you don't have the other. So if you're working in an area and you see somebody like that, stay away from them. If you, for instance, if this does happen, let's say you have a contractor in the building and you see somebody in this, don't go very close at all. I mean, like, stay like 42 feet back from them, because the arc flash off of this is going to be significant, and that gear can handle a lot of heat. A lot of heat. So they're expecting that if something goes wrong, it's going to be very significant. And also, there will be a barrier around that, I'm sure, but make sure that anybody working close to it is aware that that person is there. Not just for an office worker, but out there on the work floor too. Like, hey, that guy's over here in this type of suit. Should we be doing this right now? Oh, there's that. Okay. And that's what it's going to look like again, kind of a better picture of it. So just kind of getting it in your mind. This is what it looks like so that you're always, you can see it, you know, whenever you actually see it. You're like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. I shouldn't go there. And I think that's all we're going to hit on the awareness part of this. So that will, I am pretty sure, cover the office work. I guess red is right. Yeah. All right, real quick, crane safety here for everybody that uses the cranes out here, the big yellow guys. It won't go into all of it. Some of these slides aren't going to really apply to what you do, so we won't really hit up on them because of what I've learned over the last 2 classes. Some of the basics, though, before starting is making sure that if you're going to have the load lifted above eye level or higher, that's if you do, because in a lot of situations you won't. But if you do, you have to have hard hat and steel toe boots. I would say, and I don't know for sure, do you all wear steel toe boots? Okay, so you at least have them when you're using the crane. So that's what I was going to say, you're going to at least have to have those. But the hard hat would be required if it's above eye level or above, because at the point it could swing and hit you in the head. And that's going to protect you. So make sure everybody in the area knows that you're going to be using the crane for whatever reason. You don't want them walking out in front of you. It depends on the size of whatever you're handling on the crane, that it may be that you can't just stop the crane on a dot because it may swing a lot. And you don't want the swing effect to happen either because it puts stress on the line, which could cause it to break and fall. So make sure people know beforehand so they're not running around in front of you, or they're not doing some type of work and you're just going at them, you know, and it's like you're going to run them over. And it has happened, because they wouldn't put this in writing if it hadn't happened. Somebody has been struck by something that a crane was carrying, the load. Look at the path that you're traveling. Make sure it's clear hazards so there's no objects in the way. I know a lot of times what people will do is they'll make it like a puzzle, and they'll come down the line, and then they'll move it way over here, and then they'll go down the line, and move it back over here, and they'll go down the line. But really all that stuff needs to be out of the way so that you can do what you need to do and not have to worry about all those weird movements, because that causes people to... you really need your mind moving the load that you're moving, instead of mainly focusing on how to get around everything in the plant. So yeah, but you're set up fairly good out here, because it's kind of got a crane and it all goes one way and there's nothing really in the way in the middle. So it's a good setup, but I've been in places before where the crane doesn't just stay in one place. It actually goes over machinery. It goes down aisleways. It goes across everything. It's just gigantic. And it picks up stuff that is like half the size of this room, it feels like. So they're big. They're big cranes, and that's where some of this comes into play a lot more, is because a lot of times when you're lifting that type of load, it is very important that the person understands where they're going, how they're going to get there, and that everybody else knows. Don't get in the way of it, because they may not be able to see everything going on while they're operating that crane. So inspect the rigging, slings. This is all prior to use. Make sure everything you're going to use is functional and it doesn't have anything. We'll look at what webbing looks like torn, real simple stuff there. But it's going to be like that. Is there webbing torn? Is there? You guys don't use wire cables, so you don't have to worry about that. But is the webbing, it doesn't have any kind of chemical product on it? Does it have greases or whatever? Is that causing that webbing to lose its ability to function correctly, you know, and hold the weight that it's supposed to weigh? And then also know the limits of the crane. Make sure, and it's all printed on the crane, 2-ton, 5-ton out there. So make sure you're not lifting any more than what it can hold, because that would be the worst case scenario, and that's what happens mostly. Someone picks up something too heavy and the entire structure falls. And then that doesn't just injure you, that's going to affect everyone out there if that structure falls. Do not touch the load. This is a weird one right here for me. I don't know why they put it in there, but I understand kind of where they're at. But don't touch anything with your hands, fingers, feet, because they're trying to keep you away from it for the most part. They want it there. They want you over here. They want you walking with it, however you're walking. It may not be that way. But they're not trying. They don't want you actually trying to, as you're doing this, move it around, you know, things and such. So that's the only reason you're really going to do that. We did have to do that quite a few times because of a piece of equipment we had. It's like the size of two tables long, and it's only about that big wide. But to get it through an area that we need to get it to, we had to keep it angled that way, or it would try to swing because of the weight imbalance of the load itself. We had a special tool to keep it mostly balanced, but it would still come off balance a little bit, so somebody had to kind of guide it through. So in situations, I can see why you would have to use your hands. But it says to usually, this is what should happen, is use a push stick or a tag line. And that would basically be pretty tough, because you'd have people on each end doing that type of thing, or you'd have people holding a rope on each end. Happens though. So like I said, I see most of this type of stuff being used in the outdoor crane world, where you got huge loads, like they're picking up a house under the crane, and there's no way to keep it from spinning other than have people or vehicles on the outside with wires attached to it, keeping it centered. Never put any part of the body under it. Pretty safe stuff here. I mean, this is simple. You don't want to be crushed, right? So don't go under it, because you never know when it'll give and go, because even though you inspect all your equipment and it should work, everything fails at some point, and you don't get to pick that time all the time that it's going to fail. So if it falls and you're under it, that's a bad day. Qualified individuals, meaning you had to receive training to be on the crane. So if you haven't received any training and you're out there operating a crane, you shouldn't be. Because if something happens, it's the first thing that's going to be looked at, and then they're going to backtrack all the way through, see who else hasn't been trained. So only if you've been trained, you can operate the crane. It says if you're in this class and are currently operating a crane at your station, you're qualified. Well, you're not. Don't take that statement serious like that. There has to be a training in-house, hands-on. You can have a formal training here about a crane and everything, but you have to have a hands-on training too. It's just like anything. You can't drive a forklift unless you have a hands-on training as well.
Just FYI, we've got Tri-State that does our crane inspections. We have reached out to them to come and do some hands-on training. So there'll be some information that you'll be getting on that when we get those dates nailed down.
Yeah, that's a good thing too, because the hands-on portion is really where you learn it at. In the class, you could see some of the safety portions of it, but it's not really going to tell you how that crane operates and its functions and all that type of stuff. So, never allow more than one person to control the lift or give signals to the crane. This is kind of a little different on this, but for the give signals part, I definitely would agree. You don't want, if you have something that's very wide and the person operating the crane cannot see everywhere, and you actually have guides, people with you that are saying, okay, you need to do this or stop or move that way with the crane or whatever, because you can't move everything everywhere you go. So you don't want to have a lot of people doing this at one time. You're going to have a person usually that's going to be up front in this situation, and they're going to be guiding you. It's just like in some of your heavy vehicles where they have tight spaces that they're working in. They will have a person as well right there on the back, and that operator will be in contact with them, either maybe by eyesight and hand signals, or it could be by a radio. I don't really know if you guys will have a situation, though, where you're going to have such a large piece of equipment that you're moving. Maybe. I don't know. You guys do quite a bit of different stuff here that I've not seen. So never raise load more than necessary. Again, if you don't have to, don't do it. Keep it as low as possible. Never leave it suspended in the air, because then you're going to let the forces of gravity also play into it, and eventually it's going to give over time. Those things all those slings, they're designed to hold it, right? But they're not designed to hold it continuously forever. It is putting stress on that line, and stress causes things to break down over time. So that can happen, and it will eventually drop. Do not suddenly change direction of travel, because, like I said, you'll make the swinging effect. Once it is swinging, the weight of the load that you're lifting, do not try to stop it. You will not be able to stop it. I guarantee it. If it's that heavy, it will knock you flat down. So, and then you might be under it. As it swings, you might be underneath of it because it's knocked you down at that point. And if the line, because of the stress and the sway of it, because every time it starts swinging like that, it puts a lot more stress than it did before at the top point where it actually bends across, then it could fall down at that point too. So just make sure that you try to keep it from swinging as much as possible. That's a pretty dangerous scenario. Oh, and I guess the main thing, the bottom part, I don't know if this applies to you guys that much either, but if you have a lift point, so the manufacturer can build lift points in it, you'll see that on cargo containers. They have the hooks where you can hook in on each corner. If the manufacturer makes a part that you guys use and it actually has a lift point on it, like a place you can hook in, you have to use that. That's what it's designed for. And usually it's designed to keep it centered and stable. So if you try to go out there and do something different, you might unbalance that load, which can cause a lot more stress on the line, potentially the line breaking. These rails up here are considered hot rails. So any cabling that goes to the crane that helps power the crane is going to be high voltage, and you have to be 10 feet away. I guess that applies across most industries, because in scaffolding it's the same way. If you're by power lines, you can't be within 10 feet of that line on a scaffold. So just know that you're not going to be the one performing maintenance on this crane, so you shouldn't be up around that type of stuff. Again, it has to be marked with it, so it says 2-ton. All of yours are marked out there, very clear. So make sure you understand what it is. And then if you have on your pendant here where you control the crane, you're going to make sure that not only you can see what its functions are, like off, on, up, down, whatever. It could be right, left. I don't know how it's printed on yours, but it tells you how the directions go. It has to be on there so you can go by that and push the right button. If not, you push the wrong one and you cause it to do something you don't want it to do, maybe start swinging. Again, it can't be broken in any way. This is just a button. I guess if you were to stick your finger in there, you could be shocked. But you want to make sure the casing's intact too, and not falling apart or loose in certain places. So, like at this crease here, or this seam where they put it together, if that looks like that's coming apart a little bit, that would need to be replaced. Contact the crane, whoever serviced the crane, and they'll come out and put a new one in. So on this one, this is the only one of the slides that actually shows a chain, which probably drives the hook here. So I'm guessing your cranes have the chain too. So if you do have a chain like this on there, some of them are wire rope. So that's why I say it may not be chain. But you have wire. Oh, that's good. That's good to know right there. So we will cover a slide that I haven't been covering the other ones about wire rope. So the chain, pretty simple on chains. You want to make sure that each link is not coming apart. Number one, that the weld that's holding that intact, there's usually a little weld there. That makes sure that isn't broken and it's not bending out, and that they're not elongated in a way that look different. So how would you do that? Well, when they do the maintenance inspection on your crane, they should be performing a full out look at all those links, all the way up and down through it, not just what we can actually put our hands down on, because you could probably lower that to the floor, I'm guessing, on your crane all the way, and you could inspect to a certain distance, but you can't get the whole way up. So they should be looking at it all the way up. But if you get it down to a working level, you can do a visual inspection as well right there on what you can see. Because a lot of times that stressing is going to happen right here or in the middle. So that'd be one thing. This right here, the safety latch though, is probably one of the more important aspects of this, the hook, is that it's designed to come inward, but it's not designed to go out. And the reason is, and we're probably all familiar with why it is, but I'll just say it again, is that the load's right here and it's usually going to be down in this portion of the hook. But if something happens, maybe some weird swinging occurs in it that you weren't trying to happen, that load could shift around the hook there, and potentially if that was to go the wrong way, the safety latch, it could let that load come off of the hook itself. It would slide right off. So that latch is designed to only allow something to come into it and not allow anything to come out of it unless you were to depress this and then take it out. You have to manually do it in that situation. So different types of slings, but we're going to cover that. We're going to cover the actual crane cable as well in this one because it's going to apply. Not just slings have to have that in wire cable. So chain slings, you don't really have those, so we're not going to cover the chain sling. But wire rope, so it says if more than 5 wires and 1 strand are broken, the cable is taken out of service and marked accordingly. So if you're out there and you notice that this cable that's holding the hook at the bottom or wherever you can see, because I know you're not going to be able to get up to the top of it, but from what you can visually see, and you see something's fraying out, pay attention to it. If it's more than 5 strands, which will show kind of a better picture here to me, if it looks something like that, then that would be bad. You don't want to use it anymore, because at that point it's not going to be able to handle the weight that you're looking to lift. So that's what you're looking for in those type of cables. I'm assuming the cable looks like that on those cranes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we used to have to do a monthly inspection on ours, and it may have been a military specific, but we had to bring it all the way to the ground, and we had to have a scissor lift and actually look at the whole cable all the way down every month, just based on, I think, how often we use the crane probably. Again, there's another picture of it. It just looks worn out to me, this whole situation. It doesn't look like a good rope. Then, of course, you have your mesh material or fibrous type slings out there that you probably are using for the slings at least. And what you're looking for on these is, we're not going to really hit that. I just want to show the pictures on it more than the wordage. Is that the words would say this. You're looking for stuff like this, fraying. Anything that doesn't look right. When you first get something new, it's all tight. It's just it looks perfect. You know, the edges are smooth. There's nothing. It probably wouldn't even be that furry. If you look along the edge, it has little fibers coming out. But if you get a new one, generally it doesn't have that look all the time. So you're looking for that. You're looking. This is a big one. I mean, you wouldn't want to see that. Punctures, tears, snags, cuts. This may not be that bad. It may be just a little nick on the side up here. That's still something you would look for and want to take out of service at that point. If the tag is unreadable, you can't use it. So if you find a tag on it and you can't see what it says, then you can't use it. And then acids or caustics, they're a little more complicated. You could go into paint too if you have paints or other solvents that harden. When it gets into the material, it will harden onto those fibers and into those fibers and make it more brittle at that point. Does that make sense? You know, so if it's like that and you find it, you wouldn't want to use that either. You want to remove it from service and get a new one. And that's pretty much where you get to on the way we do cranes here, because you guys don't have outside cranes, or it's just the indoor ones. Any questions on cranes? Or anything I didn't cover that you have a question about on cranes? All right.
Okay, so anybody that doesn't need hot work or lockout, tag out can leave.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah. Don't forget
All right, so next one we're going to do is lockout, tag out. This was it's not too much longer of a slide set, but it is a little bit longer than some of the others. But it's pretty important that everybody knows how to do lockout, tag out. If you don't know how to do it, don't do it. That's really how it works. There are people that work in environments that they are told they can do lockout, tag out, but they don't feel comfortable doing it, then don't do it. I mean, that's just as simple as it gets right there. The purpose of, I passed through all that. All right, so injuries occur during servicing of equipment. So what it is a lot of times is that somebody, and this is where arc flash plays into now, because we're talking about anything greater than 50 volts or 50 volts and greater must be locked out unless you have to do maintenance on that equipment live. So a lot of times what happens is people don't lock out, and I don't know if we're in that right now. Yeah, it's right here. So I know it's in yellow and it's hard to see, but 70% failed to use lockout or failed to lock out the equipment, period. They probably just shut it off. They just quick disconnect, boom, knocked it off, and that's it. You know, the power's down. So what happens in that situation if you don't use lockout, tag out is somebody else can come back and turn it on, right? So in a lot of cases, most likely that happened. Or they just failed to turn it off altogether and decided they're going to do it all live. Failed to control energy sources, meaning that there's probably there's many energy sources. I think the most I've seen on one piece of equipment was maybe 13 energy sources. So quite a significant lockout tagout program they have right there. And I already know from what I've seen, that's why I don't disclose any information about it, that they don't lock out all those energy sources when they do maintenance. I can understand their point, but I don't totally get it. I'm like, you know, it's still something that controls something, and it can cause a action to happen within the machine. And anything that does that can put you at harm, right? Anything within it that can still work while you're working on it potentially puts you at harm. Say you turn it off, the electrical, the hydraulics, or let's say it's a press and it's way up here. You turn the hydraulics off, the press, it falls. So you have to have a block, a die block or something there, so it doesn't fall all the way down if you need to work inside of that area. More often than not, though, people don't do that, and they get crushed between the two because they're not thinking about it. Not always when you turn something off will it immediately fall. That pressure has to bleed off within the lines. Sometimes it never bleeds off in some of the lines, but it has to bleed off on its own, and while it's doing that, it looks like it's not going to fall. And then they get in there, and then it bleeds off, and there's nothing any longer to hold that press in place, and it falls freely. 5% fail to control potential energy. That would be kind of what we're talking about with the press in a way. The potential is there. Once potential passes, it turns into kinetic, and it comes to the ground. You know what I'm saying? Talks about potential and kinetic in a minute, but not too much. And another 5% disconnect power, but fail to verify effectiveness, meaning they turn off the power, and likely in this situation is there may have been a capacitor within the system, still held energy, the electrical energy, and they didn't think about that, so they went to work on it, but it still got electricity in it, so it shocked them. Hopefully it wasn't a big capacitor because it could electrocute you at that point and you could die. Well, if you get electrocuted, you're dead. So that's generally the ideal of it. You get shocked, you're not. If you get electrocuted, you're dead. So these numbers are a little bit older from 2013. Like I said, they don't always catch up. I don't know if I'm in the camera anymore. They don't always catch up. But these numbers probably don't change too much because a lot of OSHA numbers don't change, because that's why we do this training, because it doesn't change as fast as we hope it does. So they probably vary a little bit, but this is kind of where we're at. And this is where OSHA violations occur. Lack of a lockout tagout program, pretty big deal. I see that. Well, that's one of our biggest clients right now, is they don't really have a good lockout tagout program. So we're building it from the ground up for most of the things that they're doing. Lack of lockout tagout procedures, that's a big part of what I do in the last, well, at least 6 months, it feels like. It's a pretty big deal. It's out there everywhere, and because there's a lack of lockout tagout, another place you can see it, which isn't lockout tagout by the way, is machine guarding. Those two areas are pretty serious out in the manufacturing world, and you'll see that people aren't doing it right still to this day, although they should be. So people are getting hurt, or they're getting pieces of their body chopped off, or whatever, and there should be no reason why that's happening. So it's just a way that you can prevent energy from being released onto you, or it could be, in some areas you can look at it like this. A lot of it talks about the person, but it also could be a piece of equipment you don't want to destroy because it costs like $10 million or something like that. So you're just looking to make sure you don't release energy that's going to physically hurt you, or that it's going to, in some cases, damage equipment based on what that equipment is and how much it's worth. But this is accomplishing placing locks on energy isolating devices. So you put a device, or you put a lock on it, or you put a device first generally, but you don't do it on these disconnects. But let's say you have a ball valve or something for pneumatics, and you would want to put the device that prevents you from being able to open that valve up once you've closed it, and then you're going to place a lock on it. And if the lock doesn't have the information required, you have to put a tag on it as well. And we'll talk about some of that. It has to be on it. So this is accomplished, again, by placing those things on it. Different places you might want to do it. There's a lot. Electrical, pneumatic, hydraulic, mechanical, thermal. Those are big five, I think, where in all the things I've seen. Chemical, radiation, potentially steam. I've seen that a little bit. Spring-driven, suspended parts. That's a big one too. Kinetic energy is a big place in the world. Spring-driven's a little bit out there, but suspended parts is another one. Also, I would say that like hot oil and of that nature. Hydraulic fluid sometimes can be really hot in itself, so it may have a thermal property to it that you have to think about. So a lot of people think about, oh, it's just hot on the outside because it's like an engine or something that's got an exhaust. That's going to be hot right there, So, but it could be that the hydraulic oil is fairly hot itself. You have to let it cool. So there's a time factor involved. So it's saying here, and you may not be able to see it back here in the back, but it says some energy can be controlled by just being turned off. Simply flipping a switch over here. Some of it can't be, though. It has to be dissipated. A capacitor has to be discharged. So it doesn't happen over time. I don't believe you're allowed to discharge a capacitor manually, so you have to let it go on its own. As time goes, it will discharge itself because there's nothing supplying it that energy any longer, so it's going to release it over time. But others can be, like it says, dissipated, like let's say you have pneumatics, hydraulics, whatever, you have to relieve the pressure in the system. Or water, it could be water even. That's a big one in a lot of places. So you want to drain the water out of the pipe, so you'll lock out the pipe, you'll turn it off, but there's that part of the pipe that goes to whatever you're doing, This could be air or whatever that I'm talking about here, pneumatics or hydraulics or water or whatever it may be. But there's a pipe to the machine that you're working with and the cutoff valve generally. There's still energy in that potentially. And so you're going to have to bleed that off, or you're going to have to drain it. You're going to have to get rid of that before. And that's what we're talking about when we have to control that energy too. We've controlled the source for it, but there's still energy between it. It's just like if I need to work on that panel over there on the wall, if I flip this off, and one of the things we were looking at earlier when I was trying to get some answers, that if you turn that disconnect off, there's fuses in there, right? There's 2 fuses within that. If you take those fuses out of that system, can you work on that panel? Is it locked out? It's not, because there's still the line side of it coming in. So those wires would be hot on that side. Now, there's nothing going on in the box. The box can't function. But, I was looking it up on the OSHA site this morning, and I seen that. So I thought it'd be one of those things for this right here. So just know that you can't always just turn something simply off and say that it's good. There may be an extra step in there that you have to take. It says potential energy can be converted to kinetic. Goal of lockout tag is achieve zero energy state. So what we're looking at here is when we have the potential for this energy to be released on something, we want to release it in a safe manner to a level that this doesn't happen where there's a crushing or pinching or whatever kind of hazard that occurs. So we'll want to release that before a person gets close to it and go from there. So this would be another example of some type of, I'm guessing this is some type of punch or press that's out there. I don't know what this is called. I want to say that they call it a horn because it looks like a horn, but it's really like a die block in its own nature, where you just put that under that press right there and the press can't actually fall down. That there is no, the kinetic energy can't happen at that point. It may happen up to the point that it presses it, but it's kind of like a jack on a car if you think about it. It holds it up. So when is it required? When you're adjusting, inspecting, like it says, modifying, replacing parts, tool changes. That would be like drill bits or lathe parts, lathe bits or whatever it is that you're changing there onto the machinery itself. Maybe you're clearing a jam that's happened. Lubricating is probably one of these things you guys would do in cleaning. So when you're doing those type of activities, lockout tagout is required. But really it's talking about not like the outside, like I'm spraying it. We're talking about when you have to get inside of something, and if you were inside of it, whenever it's in normal function, it would do something very bad to you. So when we're getting inside of these things and doing that type of stuff, then you're going to want to lock it out. Also, if the machine's in operation, lubricating might be weird too, because you may have to pump it with grease or something like that. But if you were to do it during the operation, based on you may have to take a cap off, that may actually cause what's inside of it to come back out at you. So you'd want it in an off state so you could refill it. That makes sense like that? Grease is probably a bad example, but like hydraulic fluid, if you thought you had to replace that because of whatever reason, you wouldn't want to do it while it's on. So there is an exception to lockout tagout. There's actually kind of 2 of them here, but for the basics of what we're going to do, because from what I'm seeing, you guys are going to lock out your plugs in the facility, so you're not going to be as part of that. There is a little thing about that says if it's a plug and you can secure it in a way that nobody else can take that plug from you, then you don't have to do it. But in most facilities, and this one as well, you're going to still lock out the plug. You're going to put a cap over the plug and lock that out. But the other way that is, let's say you have to troubleshoot. Troubleshooting, you don't have to lock it out as well. So I got to go do some type of work on a piece of machinery, but there's a voltage fault of some type, and now I need to do that type of work on it. I don't know exactly what the problem is or where it is in the system, so I have to track it down and find it. And while I'm doing that, I need power on, because if without it, I won't be able to find the gap where it all stops, because I'll be able to read all the way down the line where I'm getting all the readings I need, and then at one point I'm not, and at that point you're troubleshooting that spot. Now once you figure out exactly what it is that's wrong, it could be something simple. It could be a little chip or a card, or it could be a wire bundle inside of it. Who knows what it might be. Once you have to do that and start doing maintenance, lock out, tag out the machine, turn it all the way off and do the work, and then turn it back on, see if it worked, whatever you troubleshooted. Kind of the same thing, energy isolating. different places that you do it. Disconnect switch, you might have something there. Okay, I see what it's saying there. So on these disconnect switches, a lot of times it's just going to be a lock. Not usually will you see that there's going to be a special device that's needed for it. Someone did tell me about that switch, though, the other day, and I didn't know this about disconnect boxes because I'm not an electrician. I don't do work on them all the time. But for that one right there, if you turn it in the, I guess it's the on position, the door won't open on it. But if you turn it into off position, the door will. So technically, when you do that, if you're not working on it at all, then, or that box, then, and you turn it off and the door can open, somebody can open that door and be exposed to a live electrical circuit. So there's actually 2 lockout points on that. There's the actual switch itself, and there's that little tab that pops out when you turn it off that you have to lock out as well. It's got a little lock hole on it. But I guess you could really just do the lock hole. But I'm not going to tell you that right now because I'd have to look at it a little more and say, would that actually work? Something to consider, though, to think about there, because if somebody can open that panel up, then it's live, and now you got to be in arc flash gear. So, just a little thought. I didn't know that the guy pointed out. I was like, you're right. Never really, but they don't all have that. They're not all made like that. So everything's different. It has to apply to your workplace. That's why you got to know exactly what it is you're working with and decide what are the good lockout points. And when I go out and do lockout tagout procedures for people, it kind of gets to the point where it takes me a long time because I actually have to find everything and look at it and say, okay, this is doing that and this is doing that. And that's what you guys got to do with your work. You got to kind of go through it and decide what is it. And you guys got good lockout tagout procedures from what it looks like, so it looks like you guys have been kind of going that route with it. Push buttons or selector switches. I don't know if you have anything out here like this that has a little stop button or emergency stop. You pull it out and it stops the equipment. It actually shuts off electrical power to it. It's like I don't know if you would consider it a dead man switch, but it's something like that where you pull it out and it stops it. But you can't use that as a lockout point. It has to actually be a disconnect on a wall that's powering it or a circuit breaker panel, whatever it is. It could be a main that's powering it, and I don't know if you guys are allowed to do that because it says prohibited on them. So it may have to be a contractor if that happened because you're not supposed to touch it. So you got different employees here. You got an authorized employee, effective employee, and you got other employees. The authorized employee is going to be the person that does the lockout tagout that's allowed to do that. They're the only people allowed to be working on that equipment and place a lock on it with a tag and do maintenance on that equipment. The affected employee is going to be potentially a person that actually operates that equipment. Whatever it may be, they're going to be the person that does that. And I don't know how it really works here when it comes to the machinery. I didn't get I looked at it all, but I didn't really see it all in functioning. And so, but the infected employee is going to be people around you that are going to be using that equipment later, or they were using it whenever it went down. So the one thing you'll want them to do, though, is get out of your area when you're working because they don't need to be there then. But they need to know what you're doing, that I'm locking this machine out to do maintenance on it. Other employees might be like your supervisor, your management team. It could be anybody that has to go out there and do some kind of inspection of the work site. Those people all need to be aware that lockout tagout's happening. So if you have something locked out, you have to notify those people that lockout tagout is being used while we're doing this maintenance. So this right here is just saying the best practice is lockout in conjunction with tag out. So you have a lock and tag. You could have a lock that has all the information the tag has on it, though. And that would be okay in that scenario because it has everything that the tag has. So it's like, but it kind of gets to a weird zone. Like if you have a small lock and I can't read it, now it's not going to work out the same way. So it has to be something that people can actually understand, and got to have at least the name of the person on it, and usually it has the date of when it was, or time even. A lot of times people have that. So it just gives a lot of information about it. Even some locks they have out there don't have all the information. It has a picture of the person's face on it and their name. So Some of the common violations here, and like I said, I won't go through all those either, but key left and lock is a big one. Improper type of lockout device, so it actually don't work. You know, they put something on there that doesn't work. You can still turn it on after you've turned it off. Zero energy state wasn't verified. That's a big one. A lot of people forget that step, is that at the point of turning something off, you have to still verify that there's nothing going to it. A lot of people assume that once you turn something off, it is off. That's wrong. Dead wrong, because in a lot of facilities, older facilities that you might have in older style equipment, it may not be powered by one energy source. There actually may be two boxes that power that. And someone may assume that one does it, they turn it off, they go to work and they get shocked. And that's really what happens a lot of times. They don't make sure that all the energy sources are locked out and that they've been verified that there's no energy left within the circuitry or the air lines or the hydraulic lines or whatever it may be. See some pictures. This is sticky notes can't use. That'd be a pretty wild one to see. That's the way you would want to do it. Can't have combination locks. And the reason they're doing this, I think it says later, is that you can share the combination with other people. I don't know how often that happens, but they're saying you can't do it because I guess people like sharing their combination. And the big thing is when you have a lock, it has usually one key to it. It may have a spare key, and that key may be kept in an office where a supervisor works or a management team. But if you have one key, nobody else can have that key except for you. If you have it in your pocket, they don't have the key. There's no way they can unlock it. But I guess if you give them the combination, then multiple people can do it. You can't keep that information as well as you can keep a key in the pocket. I'm going with that. That's what I'm thinking. You can't leave the lock unlocked. I see that a lot when I go out into places that there's a lock on it and it has a lockout tag with it, but it's not locked. I could take it off and use it still. Procedures aren't in depth. We won't go into that one too much because you all have seen the procedures out there, I'm sure. The pictures on it, and it has the different lockout points. The one that we have here is almost identical to it. So this has a key in it still. That's a big thing that we also see out there. Another one is that sometimes they have the hasp on there, but it's like in a way that actually can be opened still. Like they didn't put it through both holes when they closed it. They just put it through one. I don't know why that would make sense, but that's why this has to be taught, because people do stuff like that. So this just doesn't have the information, doesn't have the name of the person who applied the lock at the time. I don't mind using these as lockout points. I don't know if you guys have that kind of a disconnect on any of your panels, but they can break a lot. They're pretty bad about that. So I always say that you need a backup plan on them to say that you don't know if they function correctly, and I've been in a lot of places that they have those on them. Or it could be a handle type on the door, and there's an on and an off, but it's way over here, and I just touch it a little bit, and it moves freely, and then I get somebody to come over and they just spin it. It doesn't do anything. And it happens all the time. It's so crazy that could even be the situation, and that's our lockout point. I'm like, it's not even off. Like, that didn't control it at all. So you have to find a disconnect on a wall at that point. I like that better. Not saying you can't use something like that, but they do break, so make sure it functions properly before you use it as your absolute lockout point. That's kind of part of that verify step too. You know what I'm saying? It goes back into it. Can't use duct tape. Even though you got the tag, can't use duct tape. It just shows the proper ways over here. So these are the procedures in order of how OSHA looks at it. It's a 9-step process. You ID the energy sources. What are the energy sources coming in the machinery? You have to notify everyone in the area that's affected that you're doing lockout tagout on this piece of equipment so they don't come over there and try to restart it or mess around in your stuff. They just need to know that, hey, this machine's down for maintenance. You can't be here right now. Shut down the equipment itself, so turn it off. Isolate the equipment by basically powering off what is supplying energy to it, and then you're going to lock out that piece of equipment, which will then you'll come back and I won't get to that. So you'll release the stored energy, so that's going to be a capacitor, any kind of extra air in a line, any kind of hydraulics left in a line. You're going to bleed all that out and make sure there's nothing in it, so it can't be released whenever you open up whatever it is. And then you're going to verify isolation by making sure that when you try, one of the ways you're going to do is you may test with a multimeter. So if you're on the switch on the wall, you turn it off, but you got to do work on the plug at the bottom. Then when you get to the plug, you're going to test to make sure there's no voltage going to it. Once you know that, you can perform maintenance. But another way to verify it is going to be to just try to simply turn on the piece of equipment. That's going to be another part of that step. Turn it on, doesn't work, turn it back off. Do all the verification you need, though. Don't just simply go turn it on, turn it off. That may not be all you need to do. Like I said, we deal with different energy sources here. If you got multiples, turning it on is just going to maybe the electrical energy. It's not going to remove all the other energy in the line that you have. Perform your servicing, and then step 9 is simply restore everything back to its state and turn the equipment back on. So part of the release part is going to be cleaning up the area, making sure there's no tools left within whatever you're working on. So I know a lot of people like to store stuff on top of electrical enclosures. It's not in here, but I point at it because it happens all the time when I do electrical arc flash inspections. And so they leave stuff on top of it, tools, whatever. Make sure all of that's gone. If there's no power going to it and you used it for that reason to store something, which you're really not supposed to, but if you did, make sure when you power it back up, take it off, because all of that could affect later on down the road. You got a panel, it's got something on it, someone needs work in the panel, they're not thinking about what's on top of it. They open the panel, falls out, goes in there while they're working on it, and an arc flash could occur because you made contact between phase and phase, or conductor and conductor, I like saying, because it just makes sense more to me. But that's going to be your 9 steps. We won't go through all this because we kind of talked about it, but just know your energy sources and make sure that you identify them all before doing the maintenance. This is going to be what the lockout tagout procedures look like out on the floor. So it's pretty simple. Everybody probably already seen these, but it's going to be the picture of the machine. Some of them include, which yours do include, the lockout points over here on the right. They'll put 2 pictures on top. Some of them that you'll see, and I won't go into that, but some will be a little different where they have each lockout point at the bottom with a picture of each lockout point. But it's going to tell you the energy source. It's going to tell you that that's the one of the energy sources. There's only one of those. What you have to use, a hasp padlock. It's located on the back side of the machine, so it gives you an understanding of where it is. And then right here, I can't read, have no idea what it is. But the method of it's going to be, have no idea. I think it's just saying put the handle into off position and apply a lock and hasp. That's what it says. So it's just saying how to do it after all of that. Oh, I would have thought about it. I didn't do these yesterday like that because you guys have the same procedure. Okay. The other thing is going to be notified. Like I said, all affected employees have to be notified. Fairly simple there. Shut down equipment, so power it down, however that is. This says, after shutdown, operate energy isolating device so equipment is disconnected from energy sources. So, yeah. Apply the lock. It's basically what we just talked about, so I'm not going to go through. This is one of these things, though, you can put on wrong. There's a couple different ways you can do these. There's a couple different devices that work. But if you were to put it on the wrong way, you could still turn it on, right? So they're just making sure that you put it on in the position that the device is made to be put on. There's a way you can do circuit breakers, too, that you can do one of the way. They may have corrected this and don't even put them out there anymore. But some of the old devices that you put on a circuit breaker, you put it on backwards, and it would still allow you to turn a circuit breaker on and off, no matter what you had on it. So it was not the right way. And they may have corrected that, and they may not even put that on the market anymore. But make sure the device is made for the job. So if you do have some type of gate valve or a globe valve even, but you got to put something like this over it, so it freely spins around it, but you can't actually get your hand on it and turn it. If you were to put something like this there, or some people like to put like a chain. I've seen that before. They put a chain through it around the pipe to the other side and put a lock in it. So But you could still turn it on partially because they don't ever get the chain tight enough. Not supposed to do that. I'm just saying that's what some people have done. Just ways for lockout devices, just an idea. So release stored energy, relieve system pressure, block release springs, block elevated parts, vent gases, allow system to cool, whatever it may be that is part of your system. Discharge capacitors, etc. Verify, try to turn on the machine and check with the voltmeter. And then, of course, do your work. Again, remove all tools. I say that because people like to leave their tools and machinery when they do it, or they just forget. So I don't know how you guys control tools. We had a tool control program in the military, so you actually had to return the tools at a certain point. When you did maintenance, you had to take them back to a program. You had to type it in. You had to put it in a box in a certain position that was numbered, and it would all go back in there, and then they would turn everything back on. Generally, was how we did it. Didn't say it's always how it worked, but we had that system in place so that we didn't leave tools within an aircraft, and then they start the aircraft, and the tool's in there, and then it gets in the air, and the tool goes flying out the backside of the jet engine and destroys all the blades inside of it, and then the aircraft crashes. So there's programs in place for everybody. Just make sure that you understand what tools you took to the spot and you get them out, because they can cause a lot of damage. So some of the special situations are going to be group lockout tagout. If everybody's in there, they're like a bunch of people. You might see something like this, a ton of locks on it. You can't take somebody else's lock off. Don't attempt to take someone else's lock off. If there's a certain order, and this hasp usually has like 8 holes. In some lockout tagout situations, everything is locked out in a certain order. It has to be in that order, or somebody else will get hurt down the line. Does that make sense? And because they're all doing work in a different spot. They're not working on the same thing. It could be an assembly line as long as this building here, and we got sections being worked on by different people. And they may be supplied differently by different energies, like we just say, like hydraulics, air, anything. So it's being powered in these different sections, but each section may not have the same energy going to it. So they may have a situation like that. So in those environments where you have a group lockout tagout, if you have to, make sure that you talk about what you're doing with the other people. A lot of people just put a lock on it and go to work. But if they take their lock off and they can repower something on their end, it could affect something on your end. Shift change is another one. The biggest thing about shift change is that you're going to stop your work and you're going to let somebody else work, meaning that you need to wait until they put their lock on it before you take your lock off. So if you're the one doing the work and somebody else is coming in, let them put their lock on it, have a little talk about what you're doing maybe, and then take your lock off, and then you're good. That's how that has to work. Special situations of a lock removal, this is meaning that somebody is ill or they're not able to take the lock off themselves. That's generally what they talk about with this. That means that management has the decision to make. Do we cut the lock at this point? And they are the only one that really can make that decision. You cannot cut a lock off yourself. They have to come up with a process. They may have an extra key too. So they just say, okay, we're not going to get this person back for 3 days. They got injured or whatever it may be, family stuff. We're going to take the lock off and we're going to allow somebody else to start doing maintenance on this. But you're not going to just be able to do that on your own. They have to make that decision. Like it says, they may have a spare key. Has to be controlled by someone in the supervisor management levels. Contractors, any type of service equipment are required to follow exact same lockout tagout procedures. If they're doing the type of work that you're doing, if they're doing the type of work that you've never performed before, they have to produce their own lockout tagout procedures. And the company has to agree to those procedures. So that I don't say that they're always going to have to follow your procedures, because they may have something that you guys never do. And it may be very specific procedures that they need to have. And you just need to make sure you understand that they have them, you agree that those are the right procedures, and you let them do the work. So it's just some accident pictures here. I don't really cover this section too much, but it just shows what happens. I've seen crazy pictures, and it's like the same thing over and over again. But then I have his own lock on the machine during the group lockout tagout, so everybody took their lock off. He's doing some type of work. They restart the machine, and it mangles his hand. That's the part that really sucks. So a lot of times in industrial workspace, people don't get shocked as much as they get caught up in moving parts. So when you restart a machine, the parts move, and unfortunately they like to move together in their own rhythm. If you put some between them, it doesn't really agree with it. So like chains, pulleys, drive motors and shafts and things like that, people get caught up in. That's just a grinding wheel. That's a simple grinding wheel out there. You guys have grinding wheels? Yeah, so simple grinding wheel. I mean, the thing that you might think about with a grinding wheel is the work surface is called a work rest. It's those little plates that generally, not all grinding wheels have them. If you have a really big grinder, like a side grinder or something, it may not have that. Maybe a different kind of work surface, but a lot of times with a grinding wheel, it has like a work rest right there where you place the material on it and you move it forward, and then you make contact with the grinder. It has to be 1/8 of an inch, something everybody doesn't know a lot of times, from the grinding wheel surface. If it's any further, it can actually grab the parts that you're doing and pull it down in there. It can cause injuries that way, or your fingers and your hand can actually slide in between that work rest and the wheel itself. And then that's when you have a bad situation like that occur over something really simple. It doesn't seem like it's that dangerous at all. People have them in their garages at home, you know, so. So the basics of it is right there, you know, make sure you just know where the energy sources are. You isolate them and control them. Never share your locker keys. Never do that. And then follow the 9-step process all the time, because that's one thing they're going to look at. A good idea is to have at least somewhere the OSHA standard of the 9-step process, so that if they were to ask you questions, you can tell them, here's what we follow. Some of the procedures that we're doing for companies right now, along with the procedures that they have the pictures and they have the steps lined out. On the back side of it, they're printing those steps so that they can, because they're finding that employees aren't really familiar with it, so they have it on the back side of it so they can go, okay, here's what I'm supposed to do in the order, and here are the energy sources, here's where they're located, here's the type of device, here's the lock, here's where to find those type of items, and they go into that type of mode. It looks just like yours for the most part. It just has that information on the back so that it's available to the worker at the time that they're doing the work. Yeah. Any questions on that? No? You guys probably been doing this for a long time. Back here we're going to do some welding, brazing, cutting, equal hot work type stuff here, and some of the things you need to kind of think about when you're doing that type of work. And most of it really kind of applies to the environment around you, not exactly what you're doing in that specific situation. There are parts of it like PPE and the ventilation aspects that could occur in hot work. But, you know, a lot of it is how you've affected the surroundings in your workspace, or how your work is affecting that. So what you're going to do here is, we're not worried too much about that, but the NFPA is a big involvement in hot work as well, and OSHA will reference that as well in their standards. But you're going to move all fire hazards away from the area, right? Pretty simple stuff here at hot work. We're not trying to catch the place on fire. We are dealing with fire, and so we're already introducing into workspace. There's no reason to catch the workspace on fire and then burn the building down. So that's what we're trying to prevent here. So we're going to use guards. If you can't move anything out of the area, let's say you got cardboard and everything, paper, scraps, and things that just catch on fire all around the area, but you can't move it all because it would take you 10 weeks to do it. In that case, you have to have fire blankets to go over it in the vicinity of the area that you're doing the work. Additionally, if you can't control it, of all those levels, I guess I was going to say this first, but I'll get into it. You got to have a fire watch. If there's no way that you can get the whole space, let's say covered or everything moved out of the area, you have to have a person designated as a fire watch that is with you. So the person doing the cutting or the welding or any other type of brazing or whatever it may be that deals with basically fire or some type of a, pretty much fire, That's all it is. So if it does that, you have to have that person there that is visually looking at the room the whole time and making sure that what you're doing, your sparks are going everywhere. You may have slag or whatever it may be falling. And it may be, like you're going to say in a minute, working on floors with openings, cracks, and gratings. So if you're at a second level and that can fall through, that fire watch is also making sure that whatever's happening below, they may have to have two of them at that point, one up top and one on the bottom, that's making sure that what you're doing is not going to catch the building on fire. And if a fire erupts, they are able to put out that fire immediately. They would have a fire extinguisher at that point. I know some of the guys, I don't know how it works with everybody here when you do your types of works. I don't know if you all do just all kinds of different kind of work than each other. I know some of them said that they do have fire watches, that you guys in some situations have those. So, but I would guess it's all dependent on the situation and what you're doing. So have a suitable fire extinguisher agent, like it said, ready nearby. That's what that person's going to do. And a lot of times the person doing the welding is not even going to be aware of its surroundings that well, if you're doing it in a place that has combustibles. So a fire could break out, and before you knew it, it could be too large to contain. So that's why the fire watch is always a good idea. So a fire potential where combustible materials are close to 35 feet from the point of operation. Walls openings within 35-foot radius exposing combustible materials. So the wall itself is kind of what they're saying, and some of this here is that if the wall can catch on fire even, that's within the 35-foot, then you have to have this person available because, like I said, you're spraying stuff everywhere in these situations. And I don't know what you guys do exactly, but I've seen some pretty crazy like cutting operations where it's spraying metal all over the place, big torches, and it's not always a handheld torch in some of these situations. So realize, I understand that in a small environment it's probably all handheld, but in some places it's huge pieces of metal being cut in half, and it's just spraying sparks, maybe up to 35 feet. So material opposite metal walls and roofs could catch on fire from conduction or radiation. So it's just saying that if you're near a metal wall when you're doing it, the heat from what you're doing can radiate off that wall and hit another object and cause a fire to happen. That would be pretty wild. It would take a lot of heat, I think, but like I said, not all operations are the same. That's why they cover everything here. It's not just the guy with a torch in the hand. Person acting in fireworks must have a fire extinguisher agent, or fire extinguisher, basically a fire extinguisher, readily available and trained in their use, how to do it. They must also maintain at least 30 minutes after work access or ceases. So that's just saying that person has to stay in that area that you just did the cutting, brazing, welding for 30 minutes afterwards to make sure that a fire does not spark up. Because I don't know if you noticed, but so forest fires, for instance, sometimes a cigarette butt, you throw it out and grass catches on fire. It hits a tree and it gets to the bark and it just barely smolders on it. But it does that over a period of time. This ain't all forest fires. Some of it's lightning strikes, but this is a scenario. And it barely does that. So they think it's out, right? Everything's good. But because of you still got oxygen and wind's blowing, it's just barely like a coal forming on the outside until it gets enough, I guess, heat in a way that it bursts into a flame and then the tree catches on fire and then everything around it catches. That's why you're doing the 30-minute thing, because it'd be like burning a little hole through paper and you see the little ring that happens and it keeps happening till it goes out, right? What if it don't go out? Eventually it will combust and it'll catch a fire like that. So before welding, obtain a burn permit. Hot work permit is what they usually refer to it as. Authorized by a designated responsible person, sweep away all paper clippings, wood shaving, textiles, anything that's going to combust in a radius of 35 feet if possible. Like I said, if you can do that, then I think what they're saying here, though, is that if you're outside at 35 feet and everything's clear within that radius, you don't need a fire watch at that point. Does that make sense? You only need it if you can't clear this stuff from away the area. They're going to be your eyes when you're doing the torching. They're going to be watching everything around it. This is an idea of what a hot work permit could look like. But if it doesn't look like this for you, it doesn't have to. It's not a standard form or anything. Check. This is just saying where it's prohibited. If you're not allowed to work there, don't work there. It's saying that management won't allow it. If you're around large quantities of readily ignitable, let's say you're in a cardboard factory and there's cardboard everywhere, don't do it till they can clear it. If there's fuel sources around, there's chemicals laying around everywhere, don't do it. You have to remove those. You have to make sure there's no residual. And that will come up later, which we'll just talk about now, is if you have a container that you're cutting in half that you have to cut and it was used to hold a chemical, it has to be cleaned. And there can't be a lot of that. There can't be any residual within it. It has to be cleaned out pretty good. Another thing is with, I think it's crazy too that people do this, gas cylinders. I've seen people cut the tops off those, but they don't take the pressure gauge out the top. So it says it reads 0, and I guess they're making it where you can't use it again. I don't know why you would trust that, because the pressure gauge, anything that man makes can fail. If it fails and you cut into that, it's going to blow up in your face. So, but I've seen it done quite often that people will cut the top off of it. I don't know what they do with it after that. Maybe they just scrap it, but that's something else you wouldn't want to do. That would be like a prohibited thing to me. And I think OSHA's basically on the stance you can't do that either unless you're a company that is made to do that. They will go in and they'll purge the tank. They'll pull everything out of the tank, basically pull a vacuum on it. But if you can't do that, then there's no way to tell if it's empty. If you pull a vacuum and you go to that 0 state, then there won't be anything inside of it. So sprinkler equipped buildings, while sprinklers are impaired or out of order, you can't do. So if it does have sprinklers and they don't work, you can't do hot work in that facility. But if it doesn't have sprinklers, then obviously that doesn't apply to this matter. So it'd be something to think about if you're working inside of a building. The presence of explosive atmospheres such as unclean. This would be explosive atmospheres could be in a building. A lot of times it's going to be in a confined space. I don't know how often you guys work in confined spaces, but if you had to, this would be where you do it. You wouldn't want to take any kind of tanks into the tank with you or into the space itself. Do you guys do anything in confined spaces though?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah, we'll be covering confined spaces.
In the next one? Yeah, so, well, if it does apply to hot work, then you wouldn't want to take those in there. The hoses would have to come from the outside of the tank, from the tanks to the torches inside or whatever it is you're doing, the welders. Can't take any of that such in there. Management responsibilities. Recognize safe usage of welding, cutting, burning equipment on its property. Establish areas for cutting and welding operations. So that's where you have your welding booths. If you have those in here, they're probably assigned to a certain spot because management decided this is the safest place to do welding in the facility. Protect welding leads from damage by vehicles and slag. There's a big gap there. I don't know why it did that. So this is an area of the hot work permit I have to look into, but a lot of the programs that require a responsible individual means they require a qualified or a competent person to be the authorization person for a permit, meaning they went through training to say that they are pretty much the expert in the area on it. And that person would be they're not saying it has to be one person, but the people that are authorized to do this would be the ones that could authorize a permit. If you weren't on a list or trained to do that, you wouldn't be allowed to authorize that permit. Just like confined space entry, you have to have an entry supervisor. You can't be an attendant that's not trained to be an entry supervisor and decide that you can enter a space. You have to be an entry supervisor. You have to be trained specifically on all the hazards of the space and that type of stuff. So in this situation, I would say it's the same. I'd have to read how they define it within there. But this person's going to have to be someone that understands the operation. Insist that cutters, welders are trained in safe work habits for the specific task, so you're not going to sit there and spray a torch around and play with it and light firecrackers or whatever. Advise all contractors about flammable and hazardous materials. Now that's probably pretty key if they're going to come in your facility and do that, but I would guess if you guys are all doing the cutting torch, you won't have a contractor come in and do that for you. This kind of goes in what we were talking about, the drums being cleaned out. You want to make sure all spaces, though, have been vented and purged before welding. You don't want any gases in the air. You want to make sure that you have a safe atmosphere before you do the work. And there's a recommendation, inert gases. Kind of said that. Not going to go into that. That's kind of more fall protection type stuff, but it's just saying that if you're working at heights, make sure that you have the right fall protection. You still have to wear it, even if you're cutting. I know it could be cumbersome, but they're saying you still have to do it. The biggest thing, though, at the heights, I believe, is going to be your graded floors. Anywhere that you don't have a solid structure underneath of you, that is, when I mean solid, I mean that things can't fall through it. Then when you have a place like that and it can fall through, you're going to want to make up procedures for that, because you're affecting not only the things underneath, there's people under there maybe. You're spraying them with stuff. So make sure that there's a plan for that and everybody knows what you're doing and that they shouldn't be in those areas. So I think working at heights in that way would be more important. But definitely, if you need to have a guardrail system or a safety harness, you got to have that too for fall protection purposes. Welding cutting cables must be kept clear of passageways and ladders, so they can't be like slung up the ladder or across somewhere that people walk. It's just the same thing as walking working surface standard. Everything has to be free of recognizable hazards, meaning trip hazards, slip hazards, things like that. So this can't create a trip hazard in its own nature just by its use. Of course, you got to have your welding hood or anything else that you have. Some of them have these goggle things when they do it. I'm not sure if it actually says you have to have a 100% hood these days, but it has cutting goggles here and and hand shields, so it'd be like some type of hand protection gloves of sort. And you can see here that's the purpose of it, so it protects your body. Another thing about the PPE, make sure you inspect it and make sure it works. Somewhat before you do it, make sure it fits you. Make sure that it actually is in operational condition, because a lot of times people go out there and have PPE, something happens, and then it turns into a bad situation because the PPE failed. You know what I'm saying? So I know that sometimes, even with safety glasses, regular safety glasses, if they have a crack in them, you wouldn't want to use that, right? So you're going to just make sure that those all work, because it does have that effect, ultraviolet radiation. If it can get through the shield to your eyes, that's why it feels like it's full of sand. After prolonged exposure, it can lead to cataracts and other problems with your eyesight. So, and this applies to everybody else. If you're going to be doing this kind of work, you need to notify everybody in the area too you're doing it. I know that if you're in a welding booth or something, everybody probably understands. You may have screens and blinds that go around it so that people can't see into the area. But this type of light doesn't just end with an area. Light goes for, I guess, forever, really. So depending on how close you are, those are going to determine how much it affects your eyes, though. So even somebody standing around your area while you're doing it can be affected by it. Protect against ultraviolet radiation, sparks, fumes, and slag. Wear protective clothing, respirators if needed. Provide warning signs to warn of hot metal around the area. Use ventilation to suitable respiratory protection. So there's two types of ventilation. There's general ventilation, which is basically dilution. It's going to be like the use of a fan in a room that it says up to 2,000 feet per minute. It has to push air through the room, so it's pushing, and it's causing the exhaust fumes from the fumes from your welding or cutting operations to disperse out into the atmosphere at a rate that it dilutes it, so nobody that comes in contact with it will be harmed. And it also pushes away from your workspace, so you're not breathing it right in. Local is like an exhaust type of ventilation, where in a lot of situations this is going to be like a welding hood that goes over an area that you're welding and actually sucks those fumes up and out outside the work area. So it's kind of like a lot of times this is going to be a pull. That's kind of, we talk about push-pull, but this is going to be kind of like a pull. This is going to be like a push, and a lot of them use both, where they push the air and then they pull it up through another section of it. But you can use either one. Cannot meet the supplied. If you can't do that, you have to have a respirator. If you cannot remove that from the atmosphere, you have to have a respirator on when doing the work. We won't go into these too much here. Okay, so this is just saying that you would have to have local exhaust or airline for these types of metals. Generally, I think quite a few of those are going to run into probably your heavy metal category, where if you were to breathe them for prolonged periods at whatever their time-weighted average is and their guide, and the exposure over time would cause potential effects in your lungs like cancer and things like that. Even blood poisoning too,
What we're loving on is mild steel, right?
probably.
And we've done air sampling too.
Yeah, that's a good thing. You guys do beryllium?
We already did that.
Yeah, that's a big one when it comes to welding, beryllium. So yeah, we won't push on these. There's this one too. It talks about the same stuff, and then it reviews it, and then we're done. Got any questions on that? I know I don't cover everything that applies, so if y'all ever have questions or something pops up later and you're like, I don't know about that, would that be the way we do it? Get a hold of Chuck. He can get